Tonight's stories are simple lanterns along a quiet path, short Zen tales that calm the mind and loosen the knots of the day. You don't have to analyze them, just listen. Let each parable wash through you like gentle rain, and if a lesson appears, let it appear on its own. If sleep comes, that's perfect. If calm arrives first, that's perfect too. We'll move slowly. There's nowhere else to be. Evening settles over the small mountain hermitage, like a shawl placed gently on tired shoulders. On the veranda, the floorboards hold the day's warmth, and a thin blue thread of smoke rises from the kitchen where a kettle begins to hum. Bamboo leans and whispers, the wind braiding soft sounds with the coming dark. Inside, a low table waits with 2 cups and a clay teapot the colour of river stones. The master has swept the room so completely that the emptiness itself feels polished. A scholar arrives from the long road, sandals powdered with dust, sleeves crinkled from maps and books and plans. He bows with careful precision and begins to speak with the same careful precision. Words tumble like pebbles down a slope. The scholar carries commentaries, interpretations, and the strong fragrance of conclusions. His mind is a bustling marketplace at noon. He unfolds arguments and counter-arguments, schools and lineages, histories and footnotes, the rumors of enlightenment and the proper ladder to reach it. He speaks of how long he has studied, how hard he has tried, how much he already knows. His voice is steady and bright, a lantern held up against the unknown. The master listens without interrupting. The master has learned the art of listening the way a lake listens to rain. Every drop arrives, and the lake receives each without disturbance. When the scholar pauses to breathe, the master reaches for the teapot. The kettle has stilled its hum. Steam curls like a pale ribbon through lamplight and dissolves into the dim room. The master lifts the pot with both hands and begins to pour. The first notes of fragrance rise, a hint of roasted grass and warm earth. Tea gathers in the cup with a faint golden gleam. The sound is a quiet thread, a stream over pebbles. The scholar continues to speak. The master continues to pour. The level in the cup reaches the brim and touches its own reflection. The tea keeps coming. A glossy bead forms, trembles and spills over. Another follows. Then a slender sheet of warmth slides down the outer wall of the cup, across the grain of the table, and gathers into a small, shining pool. The scholar stops talking. Drops patter to the floor, soft as the feet of a moth. Master, the cup is full, and so is your mind. The words land with no more force than falling ash. They do not press, they do not scold. The scholar looks at the cup the way one looks at a mirror after a long journey. He sees a full vessel, a crowded brim, an edge that allows nothing more. He sees his own life of careful accumulation, a lifetime of gathering, stacking, organizing, polishing, and guarding. The pool darkening the table widens a finger's width. Silence enters, calm as a monk at dawn. The master sets down the teapot and places one palm upon the table near the little lake of tea. The heat has already begun to lift into the air. The master's eyes are not the eyes of accusation or pity. They are windows open to the evening. In this quiet room, the lesson breathes by itself. A cup that is full cannot receive. A mind busy with its own contents does not welcome anything that contradicts or loosens those contents. The scholar feels the structure of his thoughts the way a traveller feels a heavy pack. Straps dig into the shoulders, and at first the weight seems proof of purpose. After many miles, the weight becomes only weight. The master slides a folded cloth and touches the spill. The cloth drinks without judgment. The table clears. The master lifts the cup, empties it into a waiting bowl for the garden, and sets the cup down again. The small emptiness in porcelain is quiet and complete. It does not ask for anything. It is simply ready. Outside, night gathers fully. A cricket begins its single violin. The breeze threads the room and touches the wick of the lamp without making it waver. Tea breath glides in the air like a low cloud in a valley. Now allow the story to draw closer to your own body. Sense the weight you brought to this moment, not to push it away, only to notice. The forehead unwinds by a measure. The small muscles around the eyes soften. The jaw relaxes, teeth resting like friendly neighbors instead of clenched gates. The tongue releases the roof of the mouth. The throat feels wider, like a path cleared of stones. Shoulders sink a little toward the mattress or pillow beneath them. Arms rest, heavy and safe. Hands open. Fingers let go of their last invisible tasks. Imagine that your breath is the master and your mind is the cup. Breath pours, steady and kind. Inhale, pour. Exhale, empty. The cup does not resist. The cup does not argue. Each out-breath tips the vessel slightly, and what spills is allowed to go where it will. Old conversations loosen and run off the rim. Images from earlier today lose their edges and dissolve into warmth on the tabletop of awareness. Plans for tomorrow unhook themselves from the future and slip down the side of the cup like thin threads of tea finding the grain in wood. All of it leaves quietly. The cloth of the moment drinks it all without commentary. There is space now. Space for the simple fragrance of being alive. Space for the slight tick of settling furniture. Space for the hush after the kettle's song. In this space, learning happens the way dew forms on grass. Without effort, without a maker's hand, without a clock. The scholar watches the master refill the cup, this time only halfway. The steam rises again and curls in easy patterns. The scholar lifts the cup with both hands, as tradition teaches, and tastes. Warmth expands from tongue to throat to chest. There is nothing to conclude. Taste does not demand commentary. It only invites presence. The scholar swallows and sets the cup down, and in that setting down, a new world opens, quieter than thought and kinder than ambition. In the slow drift of the scene, let that new world open for you as well. Picture a shelf in your heart with many labeled jars, duties, opinions, roles, vows, stories about the self, stories about others. One by one, a gentle hand dusts each jar and leaves the lid loose. Not thrown away, not denied, simply unsealed. Air passes, the glass clears, the contents settle. No jar needs to be first, none is more important than the rest. Pace is not a requirement. Breath is the only timing. On another shelf, there is a single empty jar, clean and bright, without label. The emptiness is not a lack. It is a readiness, a welcome, a clear window. Emptiness is what allows fragrance to arrive, light to enter, music to be heard. The empty jar does not try to be anything other than open. The master lifts the kettle again, and the kettle is lighter now. Even metal appreciates release. The spout sings a tiny note as water moves. The room is a living stillness. Every object is doing only what it was born to do. The cup holds, the tea warms, the cloth absorbs, the table supports, the floor bears, the lamp glows, the night receives. Let your breath mirror this. Breathing is only breathing. No project hides inside it. Inhale like a cup being offered. Exhale like a cup being emptied. The chest rises and rests. The belly floats and settles. The back lengthens and softens. The weight of the body sinks into the bed as a stone settles to the riverbed and becomes part of the riverbed. Muscles slacken along the spine. The hips release. Thighs and calves grow heavy. Ankles feel unfastened. Toes forget their duties. Thoughts will visit, as thoughts do. They may arrive wearing the clothes of urgency. They may carry bright flags of conclusion. They may feel like important guests. The cup remains a cup. It does not hold a parade. It offers a simple rim. A thought touches the rim, looks around, and on the next outbreath slides over with a faint shimmer and disappears into the cloth of the present. Another thought arrives, and it also learns how to leave. A soft shift happens in the scholar's posture. The spine releases a notch. The shoulders lower by the width of a breath. The face grows simple, like a stone at the edge of a stream. The master sees this and does not point it out. The master understands that naming a breeze can disturb it. The breeze is allowed to be breeze. Somewhere far down the mountain, a dog barks once and then remembers the rest of the night. The sound fades and becomes part of the larger quiet. The bamboo outside taps a single hollow conversation with itself and returns to stillness. Clouds roll without comment across the hidden moon. Emptiness of mind does not mean erasing the world. It means the world arrives without having to fit into the old jar. It means you can taste tea as tea, warmth as warmth, quiet as quiet. It means kindness can move through you without needing to be approved by the committee of doubts. It means the next moment can place something simple in your hands, and your hands will know what to do. Offer, receive, set down, pour, drink, wash, open, close, open again. Let a small image settle inside you. Imagine a clear bowl placed on the step just outside the door. Overnight, it collects dew. By morning, light has turned each bead into a tiny lens, each lens into a star. When the sun climbs, the dew returns to the air, and the bowl shines empty again. Nothing lost, nothing hoarded. The bowl is most itself when it is available. The mind is most itself when it is available. The master and the scholar sits together with the open window between them and the night. No hurry rises from the floor. No doctrine asks to be defended. The master pours again. The scholar drinks again. The teapot cools slightly, and the last of the steam leans into the air and goes where air goes. The empty cup waits to be filled and emptied again, not as a task, not as a struggle, but as a rhythm older than worry and lighter than thought. As breath continues, the room of your own awareness grows quiet and wide. The cup within you holds only what the moment places in it. Then it releases. Then it holds again. This is enough. The rain had ended in the night, and morning rose out of the mist like a pale lantern behind the trees. Paths were soft, the world rinsed and smelling of clean earth and wet leaves. 2 monks walked single file along a narrow track where the forest opened to a wide brown river. The younger monk's straw sandals whispered in the mud. The elder's steps were steady and unhurried, as if he were listening for the day to tell him where to place each foot. The river shouldered past with a patient, heavy sound. Branches drifted by, small rafts carrying the forest's loose thoughts. At the crossing stone, a young woman stood wrapped in a travel cloak, rainwater dripping from its edge. The ferry rope had snapped during the storm, and the stepping stones were sunk and slick. Her eyes moved from the river to her bundle, then to her bare feet, and finally to the monks, a question already forming as worry trembled in her hands. The elder monk bowed to her with the same gentleness he used when bowing to a bowl or a tree. "You wish to cross," he said, voice low, as though speaking to the river as well. She nodded, embarrassed. The younger monk glanced at the current, then at the rules he kept folded in his mind, boundaries, forms, the clean lines of conduct that had held him upright since he took his vows. The river tugged at everything, the eyes, the robe hem, the edges of certainty. Without commentary, the elder set down his staff, stepped into the water to test the ground, and returned to the bank. He lifted the woman as if she were a cloud caught in a branch. She gasped, arms quickly circling his shoulders, and the elder stepped into the current, feeling for each hidden stone with his feet. Water rose to his knees, swirled around his legs, pressed its cool hand against his balance. He breathed with it. The woman's eyes fluttered closed as she felt the small tilts, the sure corrections, the circle of safety that is formed when someone carries you without a scrap of self-importance. He reached the far bank and set her down softly, as though placing a teacup on a low table after a long ceremony. She bowed again and again, gratitude spilling out as fast as the river. The elder nodded once, like a tree acknowledging wind. He returned across the water, retrieved his staff, and resumed the path. The younger monk followed, his heart tight with thoughts, his mouth holding back words that pulsed like fish beneath a net. The road curled through bamboo and fern, then up into cedar. Birds braided their morning calls with the soft hiss of leaves still shedding rain. The younger monk watched the elder's back, the easy spine, the loosened shoulders, the robe swaying like a bell cord. He waited for the right opening to speak, but the opening never came. The silence stretched, generous and undemanding. Time thickened like warm honey. Then, hours later, a small meadow broke the tree's long conversation, and the path widened. At last, the younger monk's net broke. "Master," he said, "we took vows. We vowed to keep our bodies and minds clear. We vowed to avoid contact that confuses the heart. What you did at the river..." His words collided with each other. It was against the rule." The elder did not slow. He didn't quicken either. He simply breathed and let the meadow carry the weight of the pause. "I put her down at the river," he said finally. "Why are you still carrying her?" They walked on. The meadow's grasses swayed like the surface of a sleeping lake. The younger monk heard the words again inside, rearranging themselves. "I put her down at the river." He tested them with his mind the way a foot tests a wet stone. They held. He looked at his own hands, empty except for the staff, and then at the secret weight riding his shoulder like a bird that refused to fly. He understood, dimly, that he had been walking with the woman's image clasped against his chest, not her body in his arms, but a story about what had happened. A story that belonged to the river and yet had followed him inland. The path narrowed and dipped into shade. A dragonfly wrote brief letters in the air, undeciphered and perfect. The younger monk said nothing. He let the elder's sentence sink like a pebble into a deep well. He waited to hear it strike bottom, but there was no bottom, only a widening quiet that asked nothing of him. As they climbed a low ridge, the clouds parted, stitch by stitch, and sunlight rested on the slope. The warmth was simple. The younger monk felt all at once how rarely he allowed a sensation to be only itself. Warmth was never just warmth. It was proof that morning had turned. A calculation about when to stop for food, a memory of a colder walk, an evaluation of his own patience. He saw how the mind picked up each moment as if it were a bundle that needed to be carried all day, when in truth, most things asked only to be noticed and put down. With every step he remembered the river. He remembered the elder's hands, not quick, not hesitant, present, He remembered the woman's weight, which must have been more than it appeared, and the elder's spine, which never buckled beneath second thoughts. The younger monk's body softened, as if the straps of an invisible pack had loosened a hole. The feeling was small and startling and good. Bird shadows crossed the path. In their shade, memories also passed. Old arguments from the monastery courtyard, a careless remark from a fellow student that had lodged in his ribs like a thorn, a family story that placed a hard, polished worry in his pocket every time he checked it. He saw himself carrying these like precious stones, lifting them too often to the light when no one asked him to. He saw himself kneeling by a river made entirely of moments and refusing to let any of them float downstream. Up ahead, the elder paused at a spring feeding a shallow basin. The water quivered with the smallest wind. He cupped his hands and drank. The younger monk knelt and did the same, and when the water touched his mouth, he let it be only water. Cool, clear. He did not add a teaching, did not name it refreshment or practice. He swallowed, and the spring completed its task inside him without a single opinion from his mind. They rested beneath a pine whose trunk was scored by old storms. Resin scented the air with a sweetness that felt both wild and medicinal. The elder drew a line in the dirt with a twig, a small, unfussy stroke, like setting down a thought and leaving it there. The younger monk watched the line darken as a sun-bleached grain of sand rolled from the edge. His breath matched the pine's approach to time, slow, without strategy. When they rose to walk again, the elder spoke in the way people speak when the words have already finished their work inside them. "Rules are rafts," he said. "We cross on them. Then we step onto shore." He did not look back to see if the teaching had landed. He trusted the shore to make its own case. The forest thinned. The day opened. The younger monk began to notice how the world put things down constantly. Dew returning to sky, petals letting go to become soil, the river releasing the branch it had held for a moment to send it out of sight without ceremony. Even the breeze seemed to be a long exhale of mountains. He let his own exhale be a cousin of that wind, longer, less defended. In that breath, the woman's face dissolved into the river that had always been moving. The thought that had dressed itself in robes and called itself rightness loosened like a knot that remembers it was a slip knot all along. Step by step, the path became a school without chalk or gongs. A beetle rolled a ball of earth with tireless dignity. They stepped around it. A torn leaf clung to a shrub, and the younger monk did not correct it. The sun slid behind the milky veil and emerged again. Neither moment asked to be improved. The younger monk realized how much of his life had been spent trying to carry the world so it wouldn't fall apart, when the world knew perfectly well how to fall apart and how to come together without him. The elder's pace set a rhythm. Lift, place, lift, place. The younger monk's heart aligned with it. He saw that putting down was not indifference. It was precision. It was returning a thing to its right size and rightful place. He had made a mountain out of a rule and then tried to move that mountain on his back. The elder had made a bridge out of compassion and crossed the river. Two different uses of strength, two different kinds of obedience. The path met a hillside terraced with tea. Workers sang a low, unhurried song that braided 3 notes into something like green light. The younger monk felt the song fall into step with his feet. He pictured a basket at his hip, filling with leaves. An old habit reached to grab the basket, to measure the weight and add worry to it. He put the habit down on the hillside. The empty hand felt cool and clean. When the sun leaned west, they reached a small shrine where travelers rested. A stone fox guarded the entrance with a face forever, halfway between mischief and wisdom. The elder sat and unlaced his sandals, turned them upside down to empty the river silt still clinging to their corners, and set them side by side like two polite thoughts that know when to stop speaking. The younger monk mirrored him, smiling at the thin line of mud that fell from his own soles, surprised at how this ordinary act felt like an instruction written in clear script. There will always be a little river left in your shoes. Shake it out when you notice. Walk on. They chewed a bit of dried persimmon, soft and honeyed. The elder gazed at nothing in particular. The younger monk considered forming another question, but the question faded before it gathered words. The persimmon's sweetness did not need an answer. In that unasked space, the lesson continued to widen without strain. As they resumed walking, the younger monk imagined his mind as a bundle of reeds he had been clutching tightly. The more he squeezed, the more the ends frayed. He eased his grip. The reeds aligned. The bundle grew lighter simply because it was held correctly. He sensed how often his effort had been correct in intention and clumsy in application, like trying to smooth water with his palm. Soon the forest offered them a second crossing, a narrow creek, clear as polished glass, sun dancing on pebbles like small bells. The elder stepped over. The younger followed. He looked down and saw the sky travelling in the water, clouds floating under his feet. He smiled and without ceremony placed on the creek's surface another small burden that had lingered, a memory of being misunderstood by a teacher years ago. The water accepted it without a ripple of commentary, carried it 3 inches, set it among the bright stones, forgot it, and kept going. A heron lifted from the reeds, long legs trailing as if the river itself was stretching. The wings beat twice, then stilled as the bird rode a current of air. The younger monk felt an echo of that lift deep in the chest where breath begins. He didn't chase it. He let it rise and fade. Something in him understood now that letting go was not a gesture of contempt, but an offering of trust. They passed a field where an old farmer was mending a gate. The man nodded without looking up, and his nod seemed to say, "I put the broken board down, I pick up the whole board, I place it where it belongs." Work was a cousin of practice. Practice was a cousin of kindness. Kindness was the river's language when it spoke through hands. By the time the path curled back toward the monastery hills, the younger monk's body carried the day with the same unmarked ease the elders had carried the woman. Present, balanced, without a scrap of extra narrative. The river's smell returned on a breeze that had walked far with them and decided to finish the journey at their side. He tasted the faint iron of river stones on the air and felt the whole morning settle into its right size. A moment that had done its work and was ready to be set down. They crossed the threshold of the monastery at dusk. Bells rang, one low, one high, calling the community to evening soup and simple words. The younger monk bowed to the courtyard's stone and felt the bow reaching farther than the body, touching the part of the mind that had been still at the river all day, clutching what had already ended. He bowed to that part and watched it loosen its fingers and open. Later, lying on his thin mat, he heard rain begin again, soft and even, filling the night with its patient handwriting on roof tiles and leaves. He saw, behind his eyes, the elder stepping into the current and stepping out, setting something down because it weighed more not to set it down. He did not rehearse the scene for use in some future debate. He let it be water. He let it go where water goes. When sleep came, It came the way the river moves around a stone, without argument, carrying along what does not need to be carried any farther. The younger monk's breath found the same rhythm the elder had used on the crossing. Feel for the next stone, stand on it, release the last. Inhale, place, exhale, put down. The mind, lightened, did not follow the woman down the path. It returned to the bank, brushed the mud from its sandals, and knew the simple relief of having finally put her down at the river. Night pooled gently between the hills, a clear, cool lake of darkness. Crickets stitched a soft hem along the edges of the fields, and the pines around the hermitage breathed in long, patient lines. Inside the small room, a paper lamp made a warm island. Tatami held the day's last heat. Against the back wall, a straw broom leaned like a thin crescent moon. A single bowl, a wooden spoon, a reed mat, a writing brush, each thing in its place, each thing enough. The poet monk sat cross-legged, listening to the kind of silence that has its own music. He had spent the day mending a neighbour's fence and reading a line of a poem that never finished itself, which was fine because the unfinished line kept the door open for evening. He wore a plain robe patched at the elbows. Thread the colour of rain had been used for mending. His hands were quiet in his lap. If a thought came, he watched it like a moth wander through lamplight and then drift out the window. Footsteps came up the path without rhythm, like someone trying to remember how to be soft. They paused. The paper door slid with a careful scrape. A shadow entered and held still, tasting the air for alarm. There was none. The man who stepped inside had the look of someone who had spent too many nights talking to hunger. His jaw was set to keep the wind from getting in, and his eyes had learned to count dark corners. He moved with the stiff caution of a person who has been caught before. His hands searched automatically, behind the mat, beneath the folded blanket, along the shelf where, in any other hut, coins might sigh against wood. Nothing. Only the bowl, the spoon, the brush, a square of paper laid to dry with a poem that looked like the track of a heron's foot in snow. The thief's breath grew sharper, not from fear, but from the embarrassment of wasted hope. This was the wrong house to choose. Across the room, the monk lifted his head. He had heard the footsteps, as he had heard the crickets, the wind in pine, the lamp humming, as parts of the night speaking in their ways. He bowed, the way one bows to a guest or a cloud. "You came a long way," he said, the words slow and unadorned, as if he were setting down a cup. The thief, caught between flight and apology, said nothing. He wanted to be angry, but found too little to push against. The monk rose, untying the sash at his waist. He loosened his robe and held it out like a blanket spread for a child. "Please," he said, "don't leave with empty hands." The thief stared. He had been offered curses, knives, bargains, even prayers in other rooms. He had not been offered a robe. It was not an expensive robe. It would not buy a week of food, but it was warm, it was clean, and it carried an impossible gift in its weave, the feeling of being given something with no price attached. He took it because the air around the offer left no other honest choice. He bowed without knowing he was bowing. He backed out into the night, the doorway framing him with pine and star. When he was gone, the hermitage was as it had been, plain, quiet, lit by one modest lamp. The monk stood by the open window, where the lattice made the moonlight into soft squares on the floor. He could feel the night's cool on his arms. Without the robe, the air touched him the way water touches the ankle of a wader, firm and gentle at once. He looked up, The moon was a round, white fruit resting in black branches. It painted the path, silvering stones, lifting the edges of leaves. If he had pockets, he thought, he would tuck light into them and press it into the thief's hands. He smiled toward the sky. "I wish I could give him the moon," he said, not as a speech, but as a note offered back to the quiet. The room accepted the wish and placed it on the shelf with the brush and the bowl. Outside, a fox moved between shadows like a thought you don't need to finish. Now let the scene draw close to your own body. Without effort, notice what the night inside you feels like. Let the forehead grow smooth, like water settling in a bowl. Unclench the hinge of the jaw. Let the tongue rest heavy behind the lower teeth. Shoulders let go of their little guard posts and drift down a breath. The back widens, the belly softens, as if someone set a warm cup there and asked nothing more of it than to be warm. Hands learn again how to be hands, not tools. They uncurl by themselves. Inhale as if the moon rises. Exhale as if moonlight spreads. The thief followed the slope of the path until the trees opened and the river found its voice again. He sat on a stone and pulled the robe around him. It was not thick, but it was honest, and honesty has its own heat. He had not cried in years because the world did not give him a bowl big enough for tears. This night, the river gave him a bowl and promised to carry whatever he put there. He felt something move in the chest where he had always kept a lock. The lock did not break. It remembered it was meant to open. He looked into the current. The moon lived there as well, wobbling when the water moved, mending itself whenever the ripples passed. He tried, as an old habit, to close his hand over the reflection, to cup it into ownership. His palm returned wet and empty. He laughed once, quiet, surprised. Some things would never be his, not because he lacked skill, but because their nature was to be shared. Wind came up the river, smelling of stone and fern. He pulled the robe tighter. The fabric carried the scent of sun and soap and a life with few surfaces. He touched the seams with a rough thumb. He pictured the monk at the window, bare-armed and unconcerned with the cost of kindness. A thrum ran through him. Not shame, not pride. Something simpler, like an animal understanding a new path through brush. He was not a poet, but a sentence formed of its own accord, the way mist forms over water. Whatever you give away becomes light enough to carry. Upstream, a branch tapped against the bank in the small waves. Tap, tap. Then, silence, as if it had delivered its message and needed no reply. He stood and walked, not quickly, not slowly, listening to the robe against his legs like a sail catching soft wind. The grass along the path shone with dew where the moon was fattest. He had spent so long trying to take his fill of the world that he had not noticed the world was overflowing. Back at the hermitage, the monk sat again, warmed by the same lamp, which asked nothing of him except oil and attention. He held the brush and did not write, which is another way of writing. The bare skin of his arms learned the grammar of cool air. He let his breath travel to the edges of the room and back. The emptiness around him felt like a friendly animal, awake and loyal. Emptiness had space for everything. It was not a hole, but a field. He thought about wealth. He had seen rich men counting and poor men counting, and the counting had the same face, worry. The most abundant thing he knew, moonlight, could not be stored, traded, or hidden. It arrived through every crack with perfect aim. It made old bowls look like treasures and treasures look like bowls. He watched it cross the floor, slow as patience. He felt it weightless on his skin, the way a thought of kindness touches and does not press. Let your own room, wherever you are, become that hermitage for a while. You do not have to move. Simply let the walls breathe a little. Let the ceiling take a step back. Let the furniture do its simple jobs without your supervision. Imagine that the light in your space, whatever its color, is the same light that moved across that tatami. It does not care about possessions. It cares about presence. Breathe in with the calm of a window. Breathe out with the ease of a field accepting moon. Out on the road, the thief passed a farmhouse where a dog, considering its duties, decided this traveller was part of the night and lay down again. He loosened the robe at the neck and felt the night slide under it, cool and clean. He found himself thinking of small things he could return. A borrowed tool never brought back, a favour he had not repaid, a word he owed someone that could make their day lighter. He did not make promises. He let small, clear intentions step into the empty spaces the robe had made in him. He walked until the path grew soft with moss and finally lay down under cedar. The robe made a tent of warmth. Through the branches, the moon stared unblinking, friend to thieves and monks alike. He did not pray. He listened. The listening reached further than any prayer he knew. He slept. At the hermitage, the lamp burned low, then lower, then went out. The monk did not mind the dark because the dark was stitched with silver. He lay on the mat. Before his eyes closed, he thought again, tenderly, of the thief, of the weight of another human being's nights, of the way kindness travels without a road. He did not hope for gratitude. He let the wish rise and fall like breath. May he be warm. May he be at ease. May whatever he steals steal away his need to steal. The night turned pages of cloud. An owl crossed from one grove to another, writing its brief vowel on the air. Somewhere, a gate creaked and settled. The moon climbed. The moon declined. No one owned it. Everyone wore it. Its silvered river and robe and skin and roof tile, without asking who deserved what. It made of all things a single, quiet country. When your thoughts return, as thoughts do, allow them to enter and leave the way moonlight enters and leaves a room, without doors, without announcements. If a worry comes with a thief's quick hands, give it a robe made of attention and kindness. Let it wear that for a while. Often worry only wants warmth. When it is warm, it walks back into the night on its own. Near dawn, frost began to gather in a lace along the edges of the grass, and the world's breath showed itself for a few pale moments. The thief woke, not from fear, but from the softness of morning. He sat up, robe around his shoulders, and watched as the moon stepped away, and a thin river of gold spread behind the hills. He did not know what the day would ask of him. He knew only that the robe had changed something he could not name. He folded it across his lap, hands resting on it, as one rests hands on a sleeping animal. He smiled, not to be seen, and stood. On the hillside, the hermitage was a shape of dark on the new light. Inside, the monk had already risen, broom in hand. He swept the floor as if brushing the night into the pocket of the dawn. The window, open again, received what arrived. On the sill, the last cold of moon touched the first warmth of sun, and for a moment they held each other without argument. Breathe with that meeting. Inhale, cool and clear. Exhale, warm and easy. The chest expands like night accepting the moon. The chest softens like morning giving it back. In this rhythm, discover what cannot be stolen, the way air enters and leaves, the way kindness, once given, keeps traveling, the way light makes wealth of an empty room. If your hands feel empty, they are ready. If your mind feels spacious, it is rich. All that remains is to stand by the open window of this moment and let the world pour through. Night leaned over the hillside like a patient teacher, and the small monastery breathed in time with the wind moving through bamboo. Lamps dimmed one by one until only the soft white of the moon remained to do the work of seeing. Gravel paths kept their own careful memories of sandals passing over them through the day. A pine's resinous sigh met the cool air. Cricket stitched and unstitched the same line, perfectly content never to finish the song. She rose from her mat as the others settled, not from restlessness, but from a quiet eagerness she had learned to trust. Practice had worn a clear path inside her, and sometimes the feet of the heart wished to walk it when the world was simplest. Her name was an old bell inside the silence. It did not need to be struck. In the courtyard, a wooden bucket leaned beside the well, its bamboo hoops dried and pale as bones. A length of rope coiled nearby, like a sleeping serpent without malice. She dipped the bucket, drew up water that smelled faintly of stone and leaf shadow, and began her slow walk back to the kitchen. The bucket was not light, but it was honest, and she carried honesty well. Water lapped the rim in a rhythm that matched her breath. Rise and settle, rise and settle. Bare feet knew the cool of flagstones, the tickle of a stray straw, the tiny grit of a day's work still folded into the courtyard's skin. Midway between well and door, the path widened, and a square of sky opened above, a window the garden kept for the moon. She paused there every night without intending to. The moon showed itself in the bucket with a completeness that startled her each time. A round coin of light floating on the dark, perfectly held, trembling only when she did. The eye wanted to call it the moon, though reason insisted it was only a reflection. The heart answered reason with a small smile and kept walking. Her life, before she shaved her head, had been a series of jars tucked behind a screen. Expectations, duties, a portrait of herself carefully dusted and set in the middle so it would not be forgotten. The monastery had taught her to loosen the lids. She had learned the relief of sweeping a floor until the floor was only floor again, no longer a ledger of yesterday's footprints. She had learned to carry water and not add to it the weight of tomorrow. Still, sometimes the portrait reappeared, her own face, quietly asking to be confirmed. She wondered if even the moon had such a portrait somewhere, a sketch of itself it checked against every roaming cloud. Just this, the old teacher had said many times, tapping a finger against the air as if it were a cup. Just this, until there is no you left to compare this to. The sentence sounded simple when the sun was up. At night, crossing the garden, it grew tender and enormous. She reached the flat stone by the kitchen threshold and set the bucket down to rest her arms. The moon floated there, obedient to stillness. She leaned closer, not to claim it, only to share the quiet. The reflection showed the travel of cloud across a white disk, the brief scissor snip of a bat, the threads of light that seemed to belong to water more than to sky. She saw too her own head bowed above it, a dark crescent framing the world. The sight made of her a horizon. Standing there, she listened to the way attention moves. It arrives, tastes, and, if not captured, proceeds. She felt the mind's hand reach, as it always does, to cup, to hold, to close a lid. She noticed the reach and let the hand rest on the rim instead. The impulse softened. The night took one more step into itself. A breeze rounded the corner, gentle, playful as a novice released from chores. It slipped between rope fibers and sang a threadbare note. The bamboo hoops, old from sun and rain, breathed with the small change in air. There was no decision, no warning. Age has its own mathematics. The top hoop loosened with a soft pop. The lower one answered by remembering the nature of bamboo, strong until it is not, and then honest. The stave wood spread like a slow flower opening, the bucket's mouth becoming a smile too wide to hold anything. Water, grateful for the chance to be itself again, rose once, trembled, and fell back to the ground in a round collapse. The sound was not dramatic. It was tender, almost shy. The whisper of many small streams meeting, the soft applause of a practice finished without an audience. Wood settled, rope slid. Water licked stone and then became many waters threading through the seams in the courtyard. The moon on the surface shattered into 100 coins that flashed and vanished and flashed again, until there was nothing in the bucket but sky and splinters. She did not startle. She did not mourn the loss or scold the hoops for their timing. She watched, the way a cliff watches the tide turn, aware, unmoved, entirely involved. Something in her wound for years around the stave of self, loosened with the same small pop. It was not a breaking so much as a remembering. Wood remembering tree, water remembering cloud, attention remembering its boundless field. No water, no moon. The words did not appear as a sentence. They arrived as an exhale that discovered it had been holding itself too high for too long. Shoulders dropped. The hinge of the jaw unlatched of its own accord. The scalp softened as if a tight band had been taken off. Behind the eyes, a space opened that had nothing to do with darkness. The heart, which had learned a careful gait in narrow hallways of thought, stepped into a field. No water, no moon. Not an absence that leaves a hole, but a release that leaves only what has always been here. The mind, briefly empty of its bucket, met the night without a name. The bucket had been useful. It was still useful, even in pieces, staves for kindling, hoops for binding a trellis, rope for a clothesline. But the holding had never been the point. The point had been the water itself. And even water tonight was simply a way of saying this. She sank to a crouch and touched the wet stone with her fingertips. Coolness rose through the skin, through palm and wrist and shoulder, into the chest, where it spread like light unchecked by shutters. The hand lifted and nothing clung to it. She watched a single drop migrate along the lifeline in her palm and fall without asking for permission. Each thing doing what it knows how to do. The kitchen door stood open. A moth wrote its invisible letters around the lintel. Somewhere near the gate, the night watch clacked his two sticks together, sound moving through space with no desire to be anything else. She felt the want that had quietly animated so much of her walking, wanting to see, to know, to keep, evaporate like a puddle meeting the first slope of sun. Not because wanting was a sin, it was simply a misunderstanding. The reflection had never been the moon. The bucket had never been the sky. The self had never been a jar large enough for what it tried to store. Breathe, the body suggested. She obliged, not as a technique, but as a courtesy. In-breath without collector. Out-breath without collector. The air moved through, the way wind moves through pine, touching every needle and asking for nothing in return. A small laugh rose, one that did not need sound. In the laugh, many rooms inside her unlocked at once, their doors swinging inward to reveal that walls had been a drawing all along. She gathered the wood planks in her arms, not to fix anything, simply to care for what the night had offered. The hoop she looped over one shoulder, the rope coiled around her wrist like a tame river. She set everything by the kitchen threshold and fetched a rag to wipe the pooled water, so the morning cook would not slip. Each movement contained its own quiet end. No extra story attached itself and begged to be carried. On her way back across the courtyard, she paused again in the square of open sky. The moon looked down, unchanged, unbothered by the loss of its small twin. It had never lost anything. It had never gained. Clouds thumbed its cheek and kept going. She bowed without ceremony, a gesture lighter than a leaf falling from a high branch. In the bow, the world did not grow larger or smaller. It simply folded around her like water around a stone. Let the scene enter your own body now, not as instruction, but as weather. Notice the forehead smooth itself, the way a pond smooths after a thrown pebble completes its rings. Let the eyes settle back in their soft nests. The tongue uncurls from the roof of the mouth and rests, weightless, like a petal in a bowl. Shoulders drop a half inch, then another half. The chest widens as a gate opens, not for a procession, just to admit breeze. Belly loosens its old knots and becomes a field that does not argue with wind. If a thought arrives wearing a robe and carrying a staff, some polished idea of who you are or who you must be, watch its reflection instead of the visitor. See how the image trembles when you tremble and steadies when you steady. Then let the bucket of attention tip a little. Watch the reflection break into bright fragments and go back to sky. Nothing lost. The visitor bows and dissolves at the threshold. The courtyard remains. She returned to the well, not to replace what had broken, but to enjoy the night that had never needed replacing. The crank creaked like an old knee, friendly and frank. She looked into the circle of stone, where a slice of the universe sat waiting in dark, immense and intimate at once. She lowered the rope, empty-handed, and lifted it again, enjoying the movement for its own sake. In a world with no buckets, there are still gestures. They are lighter. They do not collect. They connect. Back in her cell, she sat. The mat accepted her weight without commentary. Breath made its small tides. A corner of her robe was damp from the spill. Coolness rested against her ankle and then forgot it was coolness. The mind did not reach forward to the next hour, did not reach back to improve the last. It rested where the body rested, in a room that had opened to the size of night. If the portrait of herself tried to rehang itself on the wall of awareness, it found no hook, only open air. It fluttered once and became paper again, a good material for lighting a morning fire. She did not become bigger or better. She became unbusy. The world, relieved of her management, continued perfectly. Spider stitching a repair along the window frame, dust motes changing their allegiances as the moon moved, some distant fox rethinking a route. You can let things fall apart in your own imagining. The bucket of should, the hoop of must, the rope of what if. Hear each small pop as a kindness. Feel the mind loosen around its contents and realize it needn't grip to care. Caring is lighter than carrying. Caring is water finding level. Carrying is a lid tightened past usefulness. She lay down at last, not to stop practice, but to continue it in another posture. The straw in the mat recorded her briefly, and then returned to its own attention. Her hands rested on her belly, rising and falling like boats at a quiet dock. Through the window, the moon's light changed flavor, milk to pearl, pearl to a clean kind of grey. Somewhere, a bandit considered a gate and decided against it. Somewhere, a mother shifted a sleeping child from shoulder to mat, the child traveling through the air like a cup of water that does not spill. No water, no moon. She did not repeat it. She did not protect it. She let it walk the garden, watch with the pine. ride the back of the moth, climb the well's stone throat, and sit with her on the mat. It was not a thought anymore. It was the way everything happened, without a bucket, without a mirror, without an owner. The night moved. The world breathed. Awareness was the plainest thing, a window without glass. If the mind grows curious now and asks, "What will hold me if I put everything down?" let the question be the breeze that loosened the hoop. Let it pass through. Notice that you are held already, by bed, by gravity, by breath, by the quiet company of all things doing their jobs with exquisite ordinariness. You do not have to hold the moon to be lit by it. You do not have to own water to be refreshed by it. You do not have to be anyone to be this awake. The courtyard stone, by morning, will be dry. The hoops will lie by the door, ready for some new, humble life. The rope will take the shape of whatever it is asked kindly to bind. And when you come upon a reflection in your own bucket tomorrow, you may pause and smile. The surface will tremble, and you will tremble, and then you will both become still. And if the bucket loosens again, and it will, as all buckets do, you will hear only the softest applause, and you will know it is for the whole world, overflowing. Dawn slid into the monastery kitchens like warm breath on a window. Steam lifted in pale threads from a pot of rice porridge, carrying a sweet, grainy scent that softened the corners of the room. Stacks of earthen bowls waited on a shelf, each rim slightly different, a quiet village of moons. A bamboo ladle rested against the pot, handle darkened by years of use. Floorboards remembered the hush of many feet and gave back a gentle creak when stepped upon. A young monk entered, sleeves rolled, mind bright with expectation. He had come with a question, a big one, heavy and polished from being carried too long. He bowed to the master, who was stirring the pot with unhurried circles that matched the rhythm of breath. The air was simple here. Wood smoke, steam, the faint citrus of a cleaned cutting board. Outside, the bell for morning practice had already been struck, and the sound was dissolving into birdsong. The master lifted the ladle, filled a bowl, and set it on the table. "Eat," he said, as if offering the lesson itself. The young monk ate, spoon to mouth, mouth to breath, breath to a warmth that spread through the chest and belly with a plain kindness that did not need a name. Hunger relaxed its sharp edges and became a soft animal that lay down to sleep. He put the spoon aside and looked up. The question pushed again against his ribs, eager to be released into the room, eager to become the kind of conversation that fills the air with important words. The master glanced at the empty bowl and then at the wash basin by the doorway, where a trickle of warm water threaded from a kettle into a wide pan. "Wash your bowl," the master said. The words fit the room the way steam fits the kettle. They did not argue. They did not pretend to be smaller or larger than they were. The young monk rose, took the bowl in both hands, and walked to the basin. A bamboo brush leaned there like an old friend who does not require news. A square of cloth hung from a peg. Beside the basin, a jar of ash and citrus peels waited as the day's soap. He tipped the bowl so water kissed the rim and pooled inside. The warmth passed from clay to palm, from palm to arm, from arm to chest. He dipped the brush in the ash, lifted it, and began to circle the inside of the bowl. Slow, even strokes. A small cloud of scent rose, faint lemon, faint hearth. Rice starch loosened and swirled away in pale ribbons. He watched the circle of the brush the way a pond watches the passing of a breeze. Across the kitchen, the master returned the ladle to the hook, wiped the table with the efficiency of rain, and set a kettle on the low flame to greet the next person who would arrive hungry. He did not hover over the young monk, He did not watch to see if the bowl would become a revelation. The kitchen had learned what mountains learn, to stand and let weather happen. At the basin, the young monk felt the mind reach for ceremony. It wanted to name the act, to brand it with meaning so it would not disappear into the ordinary. He noticed the reach and let it fall open, like a hand loosening around a useless stone. Brush and breath continued. The bowl's glaze, hairline crazed from years of heat and cool, caught light in tiny maps. He traced one with a fingertip and felt its fine road vanish under the cushion of water. He turned the bowl, found a small chip on the rim, and smoothed it with his thumb, not to erase it, but to know it. He rinsed. The ash ran off in delicate whirls, and the clay shone with a clean that had no shine, a matte, honest readiness. He set the bowl on the wooden rack. A single bead of water formed on the lip, trembled, and dropped to the board with a sound small enough to be mistaken for silence. The brush he rinsed as well, combing the bristles with his thumb. He wrung the cloth and draped it in its place. The basin's surface settled. The room took back its stillness without complaint. "Wash your bowl," the words kept sounding, not as an order, not as a test, but as a bell note that goes on ringing in wood long after the mallet has left. He returned to the table and sat. The question he had carried for months stood up inside him and checked its pockets. Finding no place to sit, it stepped outside and walked the path alone until it forgot it had ever needed an answer. The master poured hot water into 2 cups and slid one across. The young monk held it between both palms, let the heat tell its story through skin. There was nothing to add. The cup said everything a cup can say when a person is willing to listen. Let the kitchen come closer now, your own breath the steam, your body the quiet room. Notice the simple weight of your hands where they rest. Let the fingers uncurl a fraction. Jaw relaxes, tongue settles, eyes soften in their warm nests. Inhale as if taking the bowl in both hands. Exhale as if setting it on the rack to dry. No rush. The act completes itself. Outside, a broom moved along the veranda in calm strokes. A crow announced the sun had cleared the low wall. Somewhere, a pair of chopsticks clicked together, then stopped. The monastery woke the way fields brighten, evenly, without a single dramatic decision. The young monk rose to help with the rest of the washing. Spoons, ladle, the pot's rim where porridge had dried in a pale, stubborn ring. He learned the weight of the pot through the wrists, not the mind. How to tilt just enough, how to let hot water do the heavy kindness. The ladle's bowl he rubbed with a spiral touch, and the wood woke a soft smell from its grain. Each item returned to its place with a sound that meant only here. He saw how many stray bowls he had been carrying in his head. An unfinished conversation from last week. A promise he had made to himself about how his practice should look by now. A memory that preferred to be repolished rather than left on a shelf. Each mental bowl had bits clinging to it. Little crusts of pride, worry, ambition. The film of later. In the steady rhythm of the basin, these bowls came forward one by one. He did not give them speeches. He washed them. Rinse, set down. Another. Rinse, set down. The mind's sink cleared. When the rack was full, the master lifted a single bowl, turned it in the light to be sure no thin veil had been left behind, and nodded. "Clean enough to forget," he said. The phrase landed like a feather on the young monk's shoulder. Clean enough to forget, not to admire, not to protect, not to add to a story, just clean, so it could vanish back into its usefulness. The day moved. Work called. In the garden, he knelt to pull a thread of grass from around a cabbage. The soil gave gently, and the roots came free with a faint sigh. He set the weed aside for the compost, then noticed how his hand, before today, would have carried that single motion into an argument with himself about diligence or distraction. Now the motion was only the motion. The breath that followed it was only breath. Each small thing seemed to carry its own completion like a lantern. When a thought arrived in the old robe of after this, then that, he saw it as a bowl with yesterday's rice stuck in it. Into the basin it went. Warm attention loosened the clinging, rinse, set down. The sun moved a hand's width. The cabbages shone with a quiet of their own. Let yourself follow this rhythm for a while. If something unresolved rises, an errand, a comment, a hope that keeps tugging, imagine holding it like a bowl in both hands. Feel the weight. Walk it to a basin made of breath. Let warm, steady awareness pour in. Brush in circles, simple noticing. No scrubbing hard with judgment. Rinse with a long exhale. Set it on the rack of the present moment. There it can dry by itself. There it belongs. Shoulders drop. The spine lengthens without effort. The face forgets its job of holding on. Back in the kitchen at midday, the young monk ate again. Barley this time, a few greens, a pickled plum that woke his mouth with a bright, joyful bite. He finished, thanked the food without words, and stood. The instruction rose before he could think to reach for it. Wash your bowl. The basin held new warm water. The brush waited. The act did not become dull with repetition. Repetition was how the act revealed its subtle differences. Tiny shifts in weight, in temperature, in the way sunlight struck the clay, all invitations to be exactly here. He began to notice the secret life of bowls, how they record the kindness of hands and the heat of meals, how their rims remember mouths, how small chips add character rather than flaw. He realized that the word bowl was another way to say welcome, a place for something to be held just long enough, not longer. He also noticed how often he had tried to use his mind as a bowl for what could not be held, tomorrow's weather, the outcome of a decision not yet made, the regard of others. Those were rivers, not grains. They passed through whether invited or not. If he tried to hold them, they soured. If he let them pass, they watered the fields. Afternoon brought mending. He stitched a tear in a sleeve, the needle going in and out like tide. The master passed by and paused, watching the even little bites the thread took of cloth. When you finish, the master said, put away the needle. Not because a needle left out is dangerous, though it can be, but because the mind learns completion by completing. The young monk slid the needle into its case and felt a discreet joy, the kind that doesn't need to be seen to be bright. Evening thickened. The pot simmered again. Bowls gathered. The day folded itself with the care the morning had unfolded. Once more the act, eat, then wash. He found that the space between these two held most of what he had saw in temples and texts. To receive, then to care for what had received. The loop closed without force. The master lit a small oil lamp and set it near the rack. Light pooled inside the bowls and turned each one into a little moon. The young monk smiled and felt sleep beginning to tug gently at the ankles as a cat might. You can let this kitchen remain open as you rest. The basin of attention does not spill when you set it down. It waits without impatience. Breath glides in, warm as steam. Breath glides out, clear as rinsing water. Hands in your imagination finish their task and return to stillness. The room grows simpler, the body too. If an unfinished thought walks through the doorway, Offer it a brush and show it where the basin is. It will learn quickly. The master stopped by the door and looked once more across the room. Nothing grand was happening. That was the point. The ordinary had ripened into such a fullness that there was nowhere for hunger to cling. He nodded to the bowls, to the basin, to the young monk, to the night. Then he stepped out into the corridor and became another quiet shape moving along the monastery's breadth. The young monk blew out the lamp. The dark was friendly, not empty, but complete. In it, he could still feel the cool grain of the rack, the drag of the brush, the small weight of the bowl as he had carried it. He could feel, too, how the mind itself had been rinsed and set down, clean enough to forget, ready to be used again when morning came. In the dark, something unclenched. The day placed itself where it belonged, and the simple instruction kept ringing, softer now, but true all the way through. Wash your bowl. The hall where he sat was made of quiet more than wood. In summer, that quiet carried cicadas like a fine grit in the air. In winter, it carried the small crisping sounds of old beams adjusting to cold. Between seasons, swallows stitched quick arcs under the eaves, and the rice fields below lay like sleeping mirrors. He had come to the monastery because thinking had taken him as far as thinking could go, and then a little past, where thoughts fray and begin to resemble worry. The teacher had offered a simple bowl of rice, and after the second bowl and a week of sweeping leaves, the teacher offered a question that was not a question. What is the sound of one hand? He bowed, because that is what one does when given a gift. At first, he felt the thrill of a climber given a new mountain. He wrapped cloth around his mind's knuckles and went to work. On the first nights, he tried to solve it the way one solves locks. He sat on his cushion while moonlight sifted through paper screens and the crickets ran their soft machines, and he imagined hands. He saw a hand closing and opening, fingers entering and leaving their own small caves. He pressed his palm quietly against the floorboard to make the faint, dry whisper of skin on wood, and wondered if that counted. It did not. He folded his hand into a fist and opened it again, listening for tendons. He heard heartbeat instead. He wondered whether the answer was inside the heartbeat, some shy cousin of the pulse that hid between the beats. He leaned toward the space and found only more leaning. By day, he asked the question of everything that made a sound. He asked it of the bell that called them to meals, of the broom that spoke in the courtyard, of the ladle that tapped the rim of the pot. He asked it of the river that lived just beyond the north wall, a conversation of water and stone that never got bored. He held one hand up to the current and listened, and the river said, like all good teachers, nothing new. He lay awake and asked the question of his own thoughts until the thoughts pretended to be answers, and then fell asleep out of exhaustion. The teacher did not stir the pot of his effort. When the student came for interview, he met the old man's eyes and offered his latest discovery with a respectful flame behind it. The sound of one hand is the silence that remains when everything else has done speaking, he said one afternoon, breathless with the elegance of it. The teacher retied his own sleeve and said, "You've made a painting of water. Nice brushwork." Then he poured tea. The tea made no comment, and yet expressed everything tea knows how to express when the mouth stops trying to be a scholar. So he returned to his cushion and became a roof tile under weather. The question sat before him like a bowl that refused to fill, and his mind, eager servant, ran to the well again and again. One morning, exhausted, he was assigned to the bell. He wiped it with a cloth to remove last night's breath, stood straight, and raised the mallet. His ribs felt like a cage around birds that would not land. He breathed once and struck the rim. The tone unfolded like a scarf thrown into wind, long, steady, alive past hearing. As it faded, the hall held its last soft thread, and then the thread did what all threads do, became air. "Is that the sound?" his mind asked. "No," the bell replied, very politely, having retired from the conversation. Days collected. He swept needles from the path and used the koan as a broom inside. He felt over and over the mind's insistence on being the one who hears, the one who knows. He tried dislodging the hearer, but every attempt was another hearer in more subtle clothes. He tried cleverness, which broke like twigs underfoot. He tried valor, which has its own loudness. He tried despair, which is only a kind of drama turned inward. When he was tired enough to stop trying, he ate. He washed his bowl. He sat again. At night, the field frogs practiced their little drums. At dawn, a peasant's ox cart murmured down the distant road like a low memory. He asked the frogs and the wheels. Their answers were consistent. They did what they were doing and did not lean toward his question. Sometimes, in an interview, the teacher would make a small sound, place a cup down just so, cough into his sleeve, press the heel of his hand into his knee with a faint pad of contact, and the student would lunge with his mind to catch it. "There!" he would want to cry. "There in the placing, there in the cough, there in the pressure." The teacher's eyes would go soft around the edges, the way pine goes soft under long sun. "Don't fish for the moon with a net of names," he said once, and the net tangled itself just to be helpful. Summer arrived. Heat lay across the hall like a cat. Sweat made a slow road along the spine. He practiced walking meditation in the dusk under a sky that smelled of dust and ripening. Fireflies wrote patient, unworried letters among the reeds. He lifted one hand as he walked, palm half open to a breeze so thin it might have been the memory of a breeze. The hand tingled as blood adjusted to its height. The skin drank night. On impulse, the other hand rose to meet it, and he lowered it before contact. He listened. The mind, faithful worker, prepared a report. "This is very close to the sound." He smiled and let the report turn to pulp like paper in rain. When the lotus pond opened, he sat near its lip after chores and watched the flowers refuse to choose between mud and light. Bees stitched a slow sermon. A dragonfly hovered like a held breath over a bloom. He could feel the koan exhausting some nerve that the rest of him had believed infinite. "Let it," the body seemed to say. "Let it wear out what isn't needed." One noon, the teacher sent him to repair a tear in a screen. He carried paste, rice paper, a small brush, and the question. The paper made a dry whisper as it slid between fingers and frame. The brush lifted, set down, lifted, set down. A metronome so gentle it disappeared into its own kindness. Somewhere a novice laughed and was hushed. Somewhere a dove shouldered the air with 2 lazy strokes. The thin white square covered the thin white wound. Light came through both and didn't care which was which. He began to feel the world slightly differently, not because he understood anything new, but because the one who demanded understanding had been very busy and was now too tired to argue. He would lift a bucket, and for a breath-long breath, there would be only lifting, only bucket. No exaggerations gathered like clouds around the act. In those breaths, he forgot to look for anything, and in the forgetting, there was a clarity that left no signature. Autumn leaned in. Wind edited the trees. Rice sheaves stood like patient monks in the fields. He listened for the one-hand sound in the way leaves let go and resumed being air. He listened to the needle-thin scratch of crickets thinning to silence as nights cooled. and in the last cricket's last insistence he thought he caught it. The answer, the shape, the single clean note. He held his excitement like a secret candy and brought it to the teacher at dusk. "It's the attention itself," he said softly. "The ear before it has anyone behind it." The teacher poured tea, deliberately overfilling the cup by a finger's width, watched the overflow run a short gold road across the tray, and set the pot down. They drank. The student waited for either a nod that would crown him or a rebuke that would send him to sweep stubble in the field. Instead, the teacher said, "Do you hear the mountain?" They listened. From beyond the monastery wall came the low, near-silent pressure of the world being large, stone becoming fractionally smaller, trees taking up and giving back air, the small workings of ants that have been practicing since before language. The student's breath slowed to match the part of the mountain that is not moving and never has to. "I hear my idea of the mountain," he admitted. The teacher smiled, because admitting is a kind of doorway, and doorways deserve soft faces. Winter tightened the country with the clean economy of frost. The roofs wore sugar in the morning and wet hair by noon. Snow arrived first as rumour, then as a sleep that we could see. He split wood while the white thickened. The axe entered cedar. Cedar answered with a clean report. Cold laid fingers on his cheeks and did not remove them. Later, sweeping the walkway, he could hear the broom writing on the stone, and he wondered again if the writing wrote the answer into the air. The mind nodded, eager, then fell quiet when the hands kept moving longer than the thought could stand. In the far room, where the floorboards were less often walked, he practiced after everyone had gone to their mats. The candle burned itself toward a puddle. The puddle reflected a small flame lake. He placed one hand upright before him, palm out, fingers together, as if to greet an invisible host. He held it there until the arm trembled, and then softened past trembling, until the shoulder forgot to be a hinge and became part of the wall. The hand warmed and cooled, as blood negotiated with gravity. First he heard ringing in his ears that had always been there, but was usually buried by the village of ordinary sounds. Then he heard the ringing of wanting to hear something else. Then he heard nothing that could be recorded. Some nights the koan felt like a stone he had been asked to carry across fields that had no end. He put the stone down and slept, covered with the smell of smoke and tatami and winter's iron breath. In dreams, the teacher sometimes appeared not as a person, but as an empty corridor that nevertheless had a direction. He walked. The corridor required nothing of him but the walking. On a morning when everything was the same, something loosened without changing shape. He could not have said what hour it was, because the bell had not yet been struck, and the light was that grey that has not decided to be day. He woke before waking with the sense of a door unlatching somewhere without a hand on it. A kind of ease arrived that was not opposed to unease, a wideness that did not measure itself, a hearing that did not stand opposite sound. He went out to the well to draw water for tea. Snow air tanged the nose. The rope lay stiff in loops like a sleeping snake in a story that had forgotten its danger. He lowered the bucket and felt the small, particular tug when it met its own weight plus water. Bringing it up, he heard nothing special. Setting it down, he heard nothing special. The world had not changed to suit him. He laughed, and the laugh did not turn into a proclamation. It became steam. Later, in the hall, breaths fell into step of their own accord. He raised his hand again, as he had done so many times, palm out, fingers a simple fan, elbow free. He felt the hand as hand, the animal of it, warm and private, and also as not hand. the way it was simply a place where conditions met and temporarily looked like skin. He placed his attention where the palm meets air. There was no sound. There was the end of expecting sound, the end of waiting for something other than what had already arrived. The teacher's sandal scuffed the floor behind him, a faint, unmistakable rustle of straw against wood. The student did not turn. He did not turn. Wind grazed the paper screens like a quiet animal. Somewhere a seed cracked open, and the room became large enough to include that private event without anyone commanding it to. In the space where his mind would normally compose a sentence, there was no furniture, not emptiness like a hole, but emptiness like sky, so available it doesn't require notice. He lowered his hand without having raised it. He bowed without having stood. The teacher, who had been standing in the doorway long enough to become part of it, did nothing that could be recorded as a lesson. He breathed. The student breathed. The hall breathed. The question did not disappear. It dissolved its edges and joined everything else that had no edges. Afterward, he found that he could still chop vegetables, still mend a sleeve, still make small jokes with the novice who stacked wood and sometimes forgot to cover the pile. He could still worry, briefly, about whether the turnips would be tender by noon, and then remember the pot is good at its job. He could still take offense, and then notice offense arrive and wash the bowl of it without scrubbing. Nothing built from words had shifted position. It had just lost its power to insist. He went to see the teacher, not to announce but to take tea. The old man warmed the cups with hot water, emptied them, and filled them again. They sat with the steam painting their faces. The teacher glanced at the window where snow had begun again to right its delicate accidents. "Do you hear?" he asked, almost idly, as if asking whether a bird had returned to last spring's nest. The student listened, not with ears, not with mind's hungry tongue. Snow made no sound anyone could file in a cabinet. Silence did not stain the air. Before and after were the same length. He set his cup down. It touched the table and did not. The teacher's eyes gathered humor at the corners the way a field gathers dusk. They drank. The steam rose and became what steam always becomes. He returned to tasks. In the laundry room, he wrung a cloth and felt, hidden in the act, an entire weather system. Gravity, weave, water's reluctance to leave its friends, the wrist's transmission of torque, the cloth's faint squeal of complaint. He laughed again because everything was doing what it does without asking him to name it. He had named things for many useful years. He could still name them. But between the name and the thing lay a country so wide it did not require crossing. At night, lying on his mat, the question visited like an old friend who no longer brings heavy topics to the table. They rested together. One hand lay on his belly, rising and falling with breath. The other lay at his side, alive and quiet. The room gathered around him like a body around a heart. Not two, not one. If he felt the urge to reach into the dark for proof, the urge found no handle and therefore no work to do. It rested. You can let your own hand become that hand in the dark. Palm soft, fingers unpersuaded by effort. Feel the skin's small weather, the cool of night air, the faint warmth that pools where the lifeline curves, the pulse tapping lightly against your own noticing. Let the jaw unhook as a gate opens. Let the eyes rest back in their kind wells. Inhale without collecting. Exhale without announcing. Somewhere, a bell you do not need to strike is ringing itself in a place beyond sound. Days continued. The fields greened and then goldened, and then stood empty and knew how to wait. The bell was struck morning and evening. It returned always to not being struck and needed no one to guide it. When a novice asked him what the sound of one hand was, he smiled in the way wind smiles through bamboo, present, uncontained, and showed him where the bowls were kept. They washed with warm water. The cloth left its pattern of damp on the wood and then forgot. The novice reached to say something clever and changed his mind without effort. Sometimes the old habit returned, the itch to clutch at experience and extract its essence like a miser. He felt it arrive like a small weather front and watched it spend itself on the ridge of his ribs and pass east. If it lingered, he gave it a task: count breaths to 10, sweep the step, fetch water for tea. In the doing, the itch recognized itself as extra and walked home. In another winter, a fox came into the courtyard at dawn, gaunt and practical. It looked at him, and he looked at the fox, and there was a meeting that did not require species. The fox tipped its head, found nothing of interest to steal, and left the way it had come. He saluted it with a thought that had no words, and returned to the kettle, which had begun to whisper. At last, the question and his life were not two. When he woke to rain, that was an answer. When he cut his finger on a careless sharp edge and sucked the sting from it, that was an answer. When he forgot the answer entirely and bent to pick up a fallen persimmon and found it bruised and sweet and perfect for stew, that too was an answer. Not because he had decided so, but because deciding had become one of many small games the mind enjoys when the stakes are low. The hall remained made of quiet more than wood. The seasons spun themselves into each other without applause. He sat, sometimes with effort, sometimes without, and the space in which effort happened did not mind either way. If he lifted a hand, it was a hand. If he listened, it was listening. If a sound arose, it arose. If it didn't, it didn't. In that unremarkable country, sleep arrived the way mist arrives over water, without needing to be asked, without needing to be understood, touching everything lightly, then becoming the very air. Morning arrived braided with mist, the kind that makes edges kind and wraps the world in a single, patient breath. The river unrolled from the mountains like a long blue ribbon the earth had kept for special occasions and then forgot to put away. Alders leaned toward it as if listening for news. Pebbles wore the polish that only 1,000 years of conversation can give. On the shingle where the path bent to meet the water, a teacher unfolded a small reed mat and set down a low table. The table held a clay jug, a stack of cups, and a hand-painted sign that read simply, "Water." He arranged the cups with the care people usually save for relics, rim to rim, each one turned to catch a coin of sunlight. The jug, filled from the river moments before, sweat beads along its belly. The sign needed a small stone to keep it from walking away in the breeze. He placed the stone and sat, hands on his knees, face untroubled, as if the river had sent for a translator and he had agreed. A pair of students on their way to the village stopped and stared. One covered his mouth to hide a laugh. "Master," he called, "who would buy water here?" The teacher looked at the river, then at the cups, then at the students, as if to make sure everything was where it ought to be. "Thirst does," he said. "Not people. Thirst forgets what's near." The students read the river with their eyes, the way someone reads a page already memorized, and walked on, shaking their heads, a little lighter than before. A farmer came with a yoke across his shoulders, 2 buckets swaying in time with his steps. He paused, blinked, and smiled the way a man smiles at a joke told by weather. "How much?" he asked, mostly to see what would happen. Bring me the price you pay for not noticing, the teacher said. The farmer laughed out loud, one clean bark that startled a dragonfly into a brief paragraph, and lowered his buckets to the stones. He cupped his hands, the teacher filled them, and the farmer drank until his face remembered it belonged to the rest of him. "I'll owe you less tomorrow," he said, and left with his shoulders less crowded by the day. By noon, the sign had learned to be part of the shore. People came for reasons they could name and reasons they could not. A washerwoman stood with her skirts hitched and water shivering around her calves, scrubbing a shirt that had resisted soap and scolding. She glanced over, curiosity tugging at the corner of her mouth. The teacher met her glance and lifted a cup. She made a face as if to say, "I am standing in it already." He nodded, as if to say, "And yet." She took the cup, drank, and looked surprised, the way someone looks when they hear their name spoken kindly after a long time of being called by titles. A boy arrived with a reed whistle and the dust of the hill still on his toes. He could not keep still even when his feet rested. His attention bounced like a bird from pebble to leaf to reflection. "Is it special water?" he asked, eyes wide. The teacher filled a cup and handed it over. The boy sipped and frowned theatrically. "Tastes like water." The teacher tilted his head as if listening for something hiding behind the boy's words. "What did your mouth do?" he asked. "It got wet," the boy said, and then he added, as if making the idea up from scratch, "and quiet." He stood for the length of a breath without moving. Then the whistle remembered him, and he hopped away, but softer. A merchant with lacquered sandals passed, saw the sign, and could not help himself. "What a foolish trade," he said. "You sit by an ocean and sell a cup." The teacher poured a cup and placed it between them. "You sell what?" he asked. "Cloth," the merchant said, puffing a little with pride. "When you pass a field of flax, do you bow to your own redundancy?" The merchant laughed despite himself and, to avoid losing the argument entirely, drank. Wind brought the smell of stone warming in sun, of leaves cooking their small sugars, of fish writing secrets under light. Bees visited Clover with professional focus. The teacher refilled the jug from the shallows, knelt, and lowered the rim into the flow. Light ran along the surface like a hand smoothing silk. He waited until the jug had its say with the river and then lifted it, water speechless and ready. A woman came with an argument folded under her arm. You could see it there, sharp-cornered and exhausting. She had been rehearsing the lines for an hour, trying them in different tones against different imagined replies. She stopped at the sign as one stops at a mirror that refuses to flatter. "If I drink," she said, "will I lose the words I need?" The teacher poured. "You might lose the ones you don't," he said. She held the cup and felt the heat of her hands against the coolness it offered, and in that small dialogue, something unwound. She drank. The argument didn't vanish. It set down its luggage. She walked on carrying less. Let this river come near to you now. No need to move. Let breath be the water. Inhale the slow approach of a current you didn't start. Exhale the way a river leaves every place it touches cleaner than it found it. Notice the jaw give up its watch. Notice the mouth grow calm, tongue resting like a small boat at a quiet dock. Shoulders remember they were once clouds and soften into their better job, letting weather pass. A travelling monk with dust milestones stitched into his robe approached and bowed with a hinge of spine that told of many bows. He held up 2 fingers. "Two thirsts," he said. "Which do you serve?" The teacher lifted the jug, then the river, then the empty cup, as if showing 3 characters in a play. One thirst forgets it is a river, he said. The other thirst remembers. The monk laughed silently, the way a waterfall laughs when nobody's there to be improved by it, and sat for a while without asking for a cup at all. Children gathered as they do around anything that does not pretend to be spectacular. They asked to pour. He let them. They argued about whose turn it was to hand over the cup. They resolved it with a fairness so natural it looked like play. A small girl filled the cup too high and walked with both hands, eyes tight with concentration and joy, making it to her grandmother with only a few drops gone. This felt like a triumph bigger than the parade the village had once thrown, for a visiting official who never quite touched the ground. In the hottest hour, the sign threw a shadow that looked like the word it spelled. People stepped over the word and felt a small relief they didn't credit to language. A pair of woodsmen came from the far bank with saws on their shoulders. The teacher poured and held the cups out. The larger man drank and closed his eyes, not from gratitude, but because the body sometimes knows to hide from light when it enters too quickly. "I almost walked past," he said. "I thought, I have the river in my bones already." He touched his chest. "I had sawdust there instead." A skeptic, red with opinions, appeared in the afternoon. He was not cruel. He was tired of being fooled. "You take advantage of fools," he said, not angrily, just as a craftsman mentions a crack in a board. The teacher nodded as if thanking him for pointing out rot. He filled 2 cups and set them on the table. "If I charge a coin," he said, "you'll accuse me of selling what's free. If I charge nothing, you'll accuse me of trickery. Today, bring me a story you are ready to stop telling. Leave it here." The skeptic snorted, but the idea hung around like a dog too polite to beg. He drank. He left without paying in coins, and later, somewhere between the river and his doorway, he let a story fall into the weeds. That night, he slept one dream lighter. The day moved the way water moves, apparent stillness containing 1,000 unhurried decisions. The teacher ate a rice ball when his belly reminded him to, chewed until the rice became the idea of rice, and then not even that. He drank from his own cup and allowed the same refreshment to touch him as it touched everyone else. He did not place himself outside the joke he was making. He considered briefly putting a line on the sign that read "Free Refills," then left it alone. Refill is what the river means by living. A persistent student returned, eager to turn the stall into a classroom. "Is this a metaphor?" he asked, eyes shining with the kind of light that makes moths throw themselves into it. The teacher looked at the river. "Drink," he said. The student drank. "Now it's not." The student's shoulders set their little burdens down in a way that made nobody clap, which is the best kind of applause. Clouds, those large, water-bearing monks, gathered from the west with their thoughtful brows pulled low. The air cooled. Swallows turned their calligraphy into bolder strokes. The first drops fell fat enough to make their own music on the sign. The teacher set the cups under the table to wait out the short rain and sat with his palms open to receive what everything else was already receiving. The rain performed its brief, thorough mercy. When it passed, the world smelled like the idea of clean. The sign dripped once more and then wore the water as an ornament so slim you could only see it if you came close. A woman who had never stopped at the stall, who had chosen to honor her independence with thirst, paused in the wet silence that follows rain. She looked at the river, large, obvious, loud now with new water. She looked at the cup on the table, which had none of those qualities. She reached for the small and found in it no betrayal of the large. I didn't want to admit I needed anything, she said, not sure to whom she was speaking. The teacher nodded, not as agreement but as sympathy for her labor. Needing is another name for door, he said. Sometimes it is easier to walk through a cup than an ocean. Let your own mouth be that door for a few breaths. Inhale and feel the roof of the mouth cool as if a small river were moving there. Exhale and feel the throat widen, a path cleared of brambles. Shoulders continue their slow settling. The spine lengthens like a reed finding its true vertical in shallow water. The face loses its arguments. The body remembers its river ways. Toward evening, fishermen pushed a flat-bottomed boat against the current with long poles, their bodies the very picture of applied patience. They tied up at the bend, came ashore, and drank, not because they lacked water, but because their hands needed to hold a thing that held them back. One of them, older than the river in the eyes, lifted his cup after drinking and watched the last bright drop cling to the rim before it fell. "That drop is my grandfather," he said, and everyone understood, though no one could have said why. A dog splashed in the shallows, grinning as dogs grin when they are carrying nothing but their own happiness. It shook itself beside the stall and decorated the sign with a new pattern. The teacher laughed and bowed to the animal's sermon. A heron took 3 slow steps and folded itself into the evening as if entering a poem without making the poet work. Twilight braided blue into the green of the far bank. The teacher stacked the cups again, rim to rim, a small city settling in for night. The jug was half full or half empty, depending on whether you had just arrived. He filled it from the river one last time, not to store anything, but to walk the short path of giving again. Kneel, lower, lift, set down. Cicadas tuned their long instruments. Somewhere a lute began to practice the couple of notes that mean supper smells are beginning. People passed who had no need to stop. The teacher did not consider this a failure. The river never weeps when a stone declines to be polished. A pair of lovers touched elbows and shared a look that had learned how to drink without help. A mother carried a sleeping child whose lips still moved in small drinking dreams. The teacher raised his cup to them all, a salute without rank. He did take coins sometimes if a traveller pressed them onto the table with a look that said, "Let me thank the world through you." He used them to buy rice for whoever came hungry without a story. He kept no ledger. The sign kept time. The river handled accounting in its ancient way. It received everything and owed nothing and paid out more than anyone could carry. Night gathered like the broad arm of a friend around all of it, the stool, the stones, the river that never learned how to stop, the cups drying with their mouths upward as if ready to catch starlight. The teacher sat a little longer to let the day finish breathing through him. Then he stood, stretched the spine the way a willow tests the air, and packed the cups, the jug, the small stone. He left the sign. The path had learned to read, and in the morning some passerby would see it and remember, for the first time that day or the third, to kneel by the wide, generous river and drink. You can feel that kneeling without moving. The bed beneath you is a shore, the breath is the river, the cup is the simple noticing that arrives when effort lays down its heavy coat. Inhale, offered, exhale, received. Somewhere inside, a sign you didn't have to paint is already standing. It says what it has always said, in words slow enough to hear. Water. The night was clear enough to ring when you breathed. A clean, round moon hung over the ridge like a bowl turned on its rim, spilling a pale hush onto tiles and trees. The teacher walked with the student along a garden path where sand had been raked into patient waves. They did not speak at first. Gravel made its faint music under sandals. The teacher's hand was lined as a river delta, a map that had learned all the ways of going and coming back. When the path opened towards the pond, he lifted that hand and extended one finger, not to scold, not to summon, but to indicate a simple wonder waiting in the sky. The student's eyes went to the finger. It was human, imperfect, with a healed cut near the nail and a dot of ink where a brush had kissed and been careless. The student examined the nail's half moon, the tremor that visited after a long day, the angle of the knuckle aligned with some invisible geometry. "I see," the student said softly, proud of how much detail he noticed. "I see it very clearly." The teacher lowered his hand and smiled the way a door smiles when it remembers it can slide. He pointed again, and this time did not speak. A cloud moved across the sky, thin as silk. The moon carried it for a breath and let it go. The student's attention clung to the finger, loyal as a dog to the wrong gate. He began to describe the finger in generous words, firm, gentle, weathered, precise. The teacher listened as one listens to rain, naming every leaf on a tree, but forgetting the tree. They came to a stone lantern. Moss had thickened its shoulders. Spiders had written free poetry at its corners. The teacher paused and touched the cold rock, then lifted the same finger to the moon again. "Words are lanterns," he said. "Good lanterns are bright. Don't mistake the lantern for the path." They stood together until the lantern had done all the lighting it could do, and the path kept being a path long after. In the kitchen the next morning, the student studied a recipe for barley porridge, written by some careful hand long ago. He held the paper close, admiring the elegant strokes. "It says to stir clockwise," he announced. The teacher handed him a spoon. "Stir," he said. The smell rose in a quiet column and met the student's face without approval or theory. He tasted. Taste required no comment. The recipe was a finger. The porridge was the moon. He nodded, and the nod was smaller, like a bow to something that had never asked for bows. During calligraphy, he traced characters again and again, the black river widening and narrowing with breath. He caught himself watching the brush more than the ink, the wrist more than the line, the performer's hand more than the poem arriving. He set the brush down and looked at the page, at what the page had become without his narration. Black stood on white like trees stand on snow. Between the strokes, white spoke. He heard it. Let the pointing soften in your own body now. Notice any finger inside you, an idea, a plan, a belief, aiming earnestly at peace. Thank it. Then let your gaze follow past it into the sky it was aiming toward, the feeling of your breath moving without help, the weight of your own bones supported by the bed, the quiet that does not argue about names. The nose cools as air enters, the belly warms as air leaves. Nothing needs to be labeled for it to be true. They walked again at dusk. The teacher pointed at a dragonfly holding still over the pond, at the way its wings made a hum almost too quick to notice. He pointed at a child in the village square, sitting entirely inside a plum, juice running to elbow, eyes closed in a prayer he did not call prayer. He pointed toward the mountain no map could compress, the way it wore weather the way a cow wears flies, not insulted, not impressed. Finally, he pointed at the student's chest and said, "This too points." The student felt the heart knock once, like a traveller at a door that was already open. He looked down and saw not a finger, not even a chest, but something vast standing very close, looking back without eyes. Now if a thought arrives that says, "Teach me," let it be a lantern that illuminates the next step only. Walk that step. If another arrives, saying, "Name this," let it point and fall like a leaf. You can love the finger for its kindness. You can love the moon for requiring none. When you close your eyes, the sky does not disappear. When you open them, the sky does not arrive. The pointing and the pointed at rest in the same wide quiet that is already here. Morning was a soft argument between sun and cloud. In the temple courtyard, a square of flagstone warmed by degrees. A tall pole rose from its socket, and from the pole hung a square of cloth dyed the colour of late tea. Wind passed. The cloth lifted, curved, discovered its own geography, and fell back with a sigh. Two young monks, bent over sweeping, looked up together as if a bell had been rung in the air. "The flag is moving," said one, pleased by the obvious music of evidence. "No," said the other, enjoying the friendly shape of disagreement. "The wind is moving." The flag only agrees. They put their brooms aside without meaning to. The cloth breathed in and out. A sparrow flew through the conversation and chose a higher sentence. The first monk pointed. "See? It twists, it flaps. It has its own will under the push of air." The second monk shook his head. "Without wind, it hangs like a thought that lost interest." The wind is the doer. Their teacher walked by with a basket of greens for the kitchen. He glanced at the sky as one glances at an old friend, then at the monks, whose faces wore the intentness of boys in a game. "Neither the flag nor the wind is moving," he said. "Your mind is moving." He did not stop to explain. He carried the greens on, and the greens went on being leaves that had become food. They stood, broom handles balanced against their shoulders, practicing a new kind of watching. Thought gusted. He is being clever. Thought countered. He is being simple. Another breeze crossed the courtyard and moved through both bodies in a way the pole could not measure. They felt the small hairs on their arms wake and lie down, the robe sleeve wake and lie down, the lungs fill and empty as if hired by the day. The flag became less important, then important again, then a cousin of all waving things. The first monk closed his eyes. He discovered the flag inside his lids, lifting, falling, insisting, obeying. He discovered the wind as a pressure behind the forehead, as the mind's hand pushing at its own curtain. He opened his eyes. The cloth still moved, but something about moving had changed address. They returned to sweeping. Straw on stone made its dry rhythm. The courtyard's dust gathered itself into small clouds and settled. With each stroke, they watched the thought that wanted to claim the motion. I sweep. I move the broom. I am diligent. Another thought countered. The broom sweeps. The hand follows. The leaves make their own decisions. Both thoughts were flags. The wind behind both was the insistence on owning the verb. Let your own seeing loosen now, where you are. If a worry waves, is it the worry waving or the air of attention pushing through it? If a memory flaps, is it the past moving, or the mind's weather trying on last year's clothes? Feel breath enter, ribs widen slightly, belly receives, and exit, ribs settle, belly gives back. Notice that the body is moved as much as it moves. Let the watcher step one pace back, just enough to see that watching has no weight. Later, one monk carried water from the well to the kitchen. On the path, a breeze arrived, smelling of pine and someone changing their mind. The surface of the bucket scored itself with quick ridges. He stopped and watched as the water found stillness again. He breathed with it, 1 wave, 2 waves, 3, and the bucket returned to lake. Without deciding to, he laughed. He didn't know whether the laugh was the flag or the wind. He only knew the courtyard was very large, and the pole was not as tall as it had been. The other monk raked leaves under a ginkgo that had decided all at once to be a small sun drop by drop. As the leaves fell, the air moved. As the air moved, leaves fell. He tried to say which came first and was interrupted by the soft insistence of gold landing on his shoulder. He left it there, a badge of rank in a rankless world. He felt a thought rise. If only the mind would stop moving, and another thought answer. It moves as the world moves. He raked, the pile grew, the ginkgo continued its slow applause. That evening, during walking meditation, the teacher paused by the flagpole. The wind had rested. The cloth hung like a square of night borrowed from the broader one. "What moves?" he asked the air. The monks arrived a heartbeat later, as if the question had pulled them by the sleeves. "When you say I," he continued, "what waves?" The silence that followed did no work, and yet did the work. A cat crossed the courtyard with the confidence of one who knows the location of warm stones. Its tail made its own small argument with gravity. No one corrected it. The teacher tucked his hands into his sleeves and moved on, bringing a pool of quiet with him that did not reduce anyone else's supply. Before sleep, one monk lay listening to the paper walls make remarks about temperature. He felt thoughts begin to compose their usual bedtime story. He felt the mind's wind rise to fill the story's sail. He smiled and let the sail down. The boat floated anyway. The room moved and did not move. The world breathed and did not. If dreams came, they were flags. If they did not, they were wind. In the middle, a place without weather opened like a door and did not require feet to pass through. Axes waited by the woodpile, their edges resting like mouths closed after a good meal. The yard smelled of resin and old sun. Frost scribbled its brief notes along the handles and then let go under the first attention of day. He took up an axe that had learned his hands, and his hands that had learned the axe, and the balance between them was an agreement so simple it did not need to be signed. He set a round of cedar on the block. Exhale, place. Inhale, lift. The head of the axe rose with the easy solemnity of a bell on the cusp of ringing. Exhale, fall. Cedar opened along a line it had been politely hiding. A quiet yes revealed in pale heartwood. He stacked the halves, then the quarters, his body remembering the geometry before the mind wrote it down. The ground received chips, little boats that went nowhere and did not need to. Before he had come to the monastery, he had imagined enlightenment as a silver thing humming outside ordinary life, a secret shelf behind the wall where daily tasks could be stored and never trouble him again. The shelf had not appeared. The wall had thinned. The tasks did not stop asking. They stopped begging for meaning and simply did their jobs, and he did his. He moved to the pump, a metal spine that sang its one note when asked. The yoke lay across his shoulders like a sleeping animal, buckets hanging from their ends with the patience of moons. He felt the wood find the groove between bone and muscle. He bent his knees and began. Water rose, complaining prettily, then gushed with a laugh that got over itself as soon as it began. He filled one bucket, then the other, and waited for the surface to stop writing. In the stillness, he could see a square of sky pinned to each mouth. He lifted the yoke. The body was a bridge. The load was a river tinkling its quiet talk against iron. The path to the kitchen had a dip where rain liked to flirt with puddle and leave gifts. He stepped around it, not to avoid work. Wet sandals are their own teaching, but because not stepping in it was the same kind of truth as stepping in it. At the door, he lowered the yoke. Exhale. Set down. The relief along the collarbones was honest. He did not make a sermon of it. He rolled his shoulders once, felt blood offer warmth in return, and carried the buckets inside. Fire was already leaning into its work. Someone fed it with cedar. Someone else washed rice until the water remembered the clarity hidden under starch. He poured water into the pot. The sound was a slow untying. He did not watch for wisdom in the steam. Steam knew how to rise without witnesses. He ran a cloth over the table until the wood answered with clean. He tied his sleeves above the elbow. He cut greens as if cutting were exactly the point. For it was, and there was no room in the room for comparison. Mid-morning, he returned to the woodpile. The rhythm continued without the mind storing any of it for later, like a song that carries itself with no help from the singer. In the swing, there was a brief wholeness: legs, back, shoulder, grip, edge, air, arranged without committee. He did not stop to say, "This is it," because the stopping would have cost more than the sentence could have paid. He missed sometimes. The axe glanced. The wrist learned. He placed the round again and found the line again and smiled, because wood is a teacher with no office hours. Let your body enter this day, where you are, the same way. Inhale, receive. Exhale, complete. Feel the weight of the blanket over your legs as the weight of a yoke that carries nothing but warmth. Let the jaw be the hinge that does not force. The tongue drops from the roof of the mouth. The chest opens like a gate that swings true because it was hung on level posts. Hands unclench. They were not holding the world after all. He carried water again at noon. The sun had melted the last impossible corners of frost. Children ran along the wall with small flags made of leaves and sticks, leading parades that began and ended wherever they pleased. A breeze passed and told every face it touched, "You belong to the same air." He set the buckets down and stood for a breath in the shade where tea waited in a dented kettle. He drank, mouth to cup, cup to throat, throat to belly. No commentary, thirst met. He wiped his mouth on his sleeve and laughed because the sleeve had learned to dry exactly enough. In the garden, he weeded. Roots came free with a small pop-like shy laughter. Soil patterned his palms in roads and islands. He traced one with a thumb and then forgot to pretend it meant anything, because it did not need to mean. A novice asked how to pull without tearing. He showed with 2 fingers and patience. "Don't argue with what holds it," he said. "Lean with it once, then lean the other way." The novice nodded as if he had been given a rare text. The weed came up whole, roots long as a mouse's tail. They set it aside for the compost's slow hunger. Afternoon brought a torn robe. He sat in the doorway where light had gathered like warm water in a basin and threaded a needle. The needle passed in and out of cloth like a small fish through reeds. He did not wish for fish or reeds. He stitched. A bell rang across the yard, a round sound with no corners. He tied off the thread, bit it, smoothed the seam with a thumb, and put the needle away. He did not leave it high where it would prick a hand later. He finished. At dusk, he chopped a last armful. The axe leaned back against the stump and looked like a companion waiting for stories. He patted its handle, an old habit from another life, when he believed objects needed attention to be faithful. Now he knew attention was its own faithfulness. He carried the wood inside. Fire said thank you in the only language fire speaks. You can live this way under blankets, in corridors of thought, at the sink, in a car, in a field, in the smallest room in your house. Whatever is in your hands, soap, wheel, spoon, broom, let it be the moon and the finger, both. Let doing point at being until they forget which is which. Chop, feel weight, hear grain give, smell resin. Carry, shoulders settle, hips balance, feet find earth. The sacred is not hiding inside or outside these verbs. It is the verb. Night came in its simple robe. Stars lit themselves without gathering. Bowls were washed. The cloth was wrung. The floor remembered and then forgot the day. He lay down. The body arranged itself with the competence of an old craftsperson cleaning a bench before leaving. Breath kept its shift. If a thought knocked, small, important sounding, he handed it the yoke and asked it to carry water. Most thoughts prefer to be carried. Those that agree to carry soon grow quiet. Those that refuse are already done for the day. In the dark, nothing special happened, and it was exactly enough. The first time he knew the ox was real, he did not see it. He felt it. Morning had just stepped out of the river, beads of fog still clinging to reeds. He walked the low path where willow shadows stitched themselves to earth and came upon a shallow crossing where silt held the memory of everything that had passed in the night. There, pressed into the soft brown, rounds, ovals, crescents, the prints of a heavy animal that had not asked permission. The edges were new, not weathered yet to doubt. Water had settled inside each impression, dim mirrors that moved when he did. He knelt and touched one, half expecting warmth. His finger came away wet and ordinary, which made the discovery more trustworthy. He had searched for so long he had almost forgotten what searching meant. He had asked the forest, which said nothing and gave him trees. He had asked wind, which said everything and gave him the day. He had asked his thoughts, which were clever and therefore unreliable, but these blunt signatures in mud, belonged to something that breathed. He lifted his head and found more. A brushed wall where a flank had pushed through reeds, 3 black hairs caught on thorn, the faint, sour sweet of hide like clean rain on old leather. He smiled, not with achievement, but with recognition, the way you smile when a long letter arrives in a hand you know. He followed without hurry. The path was not a path yet. It was a suggestion written across grass. He did not force it to become clearer. The prints led to the stream where stones glazed themselves in thin water. Here the track dissolved into many loops, as if the ox had paced or stopped to drink or considered a private matter. He stood still and listened, and in listening found another hoofprint, not in mud, but in him. Breath moving in and out without needing to be led. The thought came, the ox always leaves marks when it passes. The trick is to notice where you are looking. He climbed the low rise where cicadas spun heat into sound, and for a moment, in the far field, he saw movement. Not the wind's quick hand, something heavier and deliberate, a brown hill that paused and shifted, a tail making a brief question mark. He did not run. He let the sight's echo move through his ribs and then out. Even a glimpse must be allowed to be a glimpse. He reached the far field and found nothing but grass, crushed here and there in the shape of a great body's afternoon. All day he followed signs that were never arguments, a rubbed patch on a cedar trunk, the deep line of a hoof on a slope where clay remembered better than dust, a sudden quiet in birds who knew the language of large animals. He was not chasing, he was keeping company with a presence that did not mind being ahead. Toward evening he came upon a pool cupped in rock. At its edge, fresh mud had the immodest sheen of newness. Something had stood there and owned its thirst. He knelt again and saw the sky in the water, the way the sky fits everywhere that holds still enough to carry it. Let your own search fall into this gentleness. Inhale and look for the nearest print, the coolness at the back of the throat as air enters. Exhale and see how the chest smooths itself like mud after water leaves. Another print, the way the bed receives your weight without condition. Another, a thought arrives and departs, leaving behind the clear shape of where it walked. There is no need to chase what is already drawing near from every direction. Let the breath be the sound of a large animal moving through tall grass. You do not have to part with your hands. At dusk, light pooled in the ruts of a cart road like melted copper. He stood there, not triumphant, not impatient, just glad in the way a field is glad when rain chooses it. Somewhere ahead, a heavy thing sighed and lay down. He did not disturb it. He lay down too on the edge of his own listening, and slept with a smile that felt older than his face. The cup was chipped at the rim and perfect. It fit the teacher's hand the way a river fits its banks, by years of learning one another's shape. He held it up and rolled his wrist so that morning found the hairline cracks and settled there like silver threads. To me, he said, this is already broken. He did not say it with sadness or a wink, not for effect. He said it as a person says, the plum blossoms, because they do. The young ones frowned the first time they heard it, as if he had cursed a friend. He poured tea. Steam wrote its light handwriting. When it shatters, I will say, of course, he continued, and until then, I will enjoy it fully. He set the cup down. The small click was as satisfying as a knot pulled snug. That afternoon, a boy elbowed a shelf. The cup leapt, tried briefly to learn to fly, discovered instead its destiny as music. The room rang with bright ceramics and then with bright absence. Everyone froze, the boy with his mouth already apologizing, the air with its breath held. The teacher turned, saw the scatter, and smiled as if someone had told a reliable joke. There you are, he said to nobody in particular, and knelt to gather the pieces, each with edges clean as honesty. He did not sigh for the cup's past. He did not hurry toward a lesson. He wrapped the shards in cloth and carried them to the garden. Later, he set them along the base of a path to catch light like small moons. They were not waste. They had rejoined the world in a new grammar. He had practiced this long before porcelain. He had practiced with mornings, with friendships, with bodies that changed their agreements. When his mother's hands, once so certain in the kitchen, forgot the dance of knife and onion, he did not argue with the river of time. He held her wrists, steadied the knife, and said, of course. And then he fed her. And then, later, he walked alone, letting the word, of course, be a boat that did not leak grief, but did not refuse it either. To live with the cup already broken is not to live carelessly. It is to love without turning the beloved into a hostage. He did not leave the cup on the edge of a shelf to prove a point. He placed it in the center of the table and welcomed its presence, as one welcomes a guest who has brought only stories and appetite. Because he knew he could not keep it forever, he tasted tea more carefully, its warmth crowding the tongue, its bitterness a kindness to the back of the mouth. He washed the cup as if washing were farewell and greeting in the same motion. He set it to dry in a square of sun. Let your own holding learn this. Inhale and feel the way breath arrives like a visitor that will certainly leave. Exhale and let it go, not as a loss, but as a completed visit. Think of something you love, a person, a place, a moment alive on the shelf of memory. Notice the impulse to wrap it in bubble and guard it from air. Loosen the wrap by a breath. Let gratitude touch it, instead of fear. Taste it now, because now is the only way to taste anything. The boy who broke the cup sat later with the teacher, miserably careful with his own tea. "I didn't mean to," he said. "And yet you did," the teacher replied, his voice a path without stones. He reached out and tapped the boy's cup. "This one is already broken," he added. The boy stared at the intact rim, then at the teacher. "So, I should not love it?" "You should love it without terror," the teacher said. "That is stronger than any glue." At night, the teacher opened a small box and took out a cup repaired long ago with bright metal. The line of repair did not hide itself. It glittered like a river seen from far away. "Sometimes we mend," he said to the dark. "And sometimes we scatter. And sometimes we let light into the crack and call it beautiful." He drank water and tasted in the cool the fact that everything he held had already agreed to leave, and that this made each sip more complete. A monk asked, "Does a dog have Buddha nature?" The hall had no answer prepared. The teachers had emptied their pockets of yes and no years ago, and found lint and a coin of laughter. Zhaozhu said, "Moo." It sounded like the first half of a cow in a far field, or a door that remembers to open instead of resist. It did not translate cleanly, which is how you know it is useful. The student carried moo like a seed that could not be shelled. He rolled it in the mouth. He said it on the in-breath, soft, an oar-dipping. He said it on the out-breath, softer, an oar-lifting, a river unwrinkling. He tried to use it as a sword to cut through confusion. It dulled the sword and kept shining. He tried to use it as a pillow to nap on. It sat him upright and watched with him until dawn turned the shoji from ash to milk. Yes and no, like to be kings, they sit on opposite thrones and throw laws at each other until everyone in the room forgets they have feet. Moo is the simple intention to walk out, not to choose a third throne, to unask the question that keeps the throne maker employed. When he went to interview, the student announced what he thought he had discovered. "Moo is negation," he said. "Moo means no." The teacher looked at him the way a lake looks at a stone, patient, amused by gravity, unconcerned with argument. "Moo," the teacher said, and the word did not agree to be a definition. He took moo to the kitchen. A novice said, "Are you finished with the knife?" He answered, "Moo," and the novice waited, uncertain, then reached for a different knife and learned to sharpen it. He took moo to the garden. A gardener said, "Is this weed?" He answered, "Moo," and the gardener looked at the plant, and the plant answered for itself by growing where it pleased or not. He took moo to bed. The mind said, "Was today good or not good?" He answered, "Moo." And the day returned to the river it had come from without needing a scorecard. Let the gate open for you now. If the question arrives, "Am I doing this right?" Mew. If another arrives, "Am I failing?" Mew. Not as dismissal, not as boredom, as a hand removing the stick from the spokes of a wheel. Feel the breath come up in the body. Moo. Feel it go down and away, spreading like warm water. Moo. The jaw softens, the tongue rests, the forehead smooths as if ironed by a kind palm. Between the eyebrows, the knotted skeptic forgets it's not for a moment. Moo is not an answer that ends a conversation. It is the quiet that allows the world to speak all at once. One day, the student, carrying buckets, stumbled. He reached to catch what could not be caught and said moo without thinking, the way a child says, "oh," when water touches new skin. The buckets danced, shed half their weight, and were content. He set them down and laughed because the laugh belonged to no side. He saw how often his mind tried to make itself important by choosing teams. Mu did not reject either team. It dissolved the field they were fighting on. Years later, a novice asked him in the corridor, "Does a dog have Buddha nature?" The old student felt the throne stir. He bowed to them, to the dog, to the novice's earnest face. "Mu," he said softly, and then he added, "Wash your bowl." The novice blinked, then smiled, then went to the kitchen and discovered, in the warm swirl of suds, the strange relief of a question unasked. By the mountain temple stood a little hut where an old man swept, cooked, and went to evening chanting. He looked like anyone. Eyes that had learned to use kindness as light, hands that remembered tools. Once, long ago, he had sat with a great teacher. He had been smart enough to confuse himself. What happens to the enlightened one after death? Does he fall into cause and effect or not? He had asked, testing the net, proud of the weave. Not subject to cause and effect, he had declared to a later student, liking how the words made him feel tall. For that, says the story, he wore a fox body for 500 lives, tail a long punctuation mark, dragging behind him through snow. Not because foxes are punishment, because confusion likes good camouflage. One evening he came again to the hall, not in fox shape, but as an old man who had never quite moved away. He bowed to Hyakujo. "I used to say, not subject to cause and effect," he admitted, the way a person sets down a bag that has rubbed a shoulder raw. "Please grant me a turning word." Hyakujo said, "Do not ignore cause and effect." No thunder struck, no bell rang. The words were the plain clothes of truth. The old man bowed and felt a lock opening in a door he had tried to walk through sideways for many years. The next day, they found a fox dead behind the hall. Hyakujo asked the monks to carry it and perform funeral rites. They did, and the mountain wind, which observes all ceremonies, approved without sound. The story walks with you easily. It does not demand you become an accountant of karma, a worried clerk ink-staining the heart. It asks you to notice that consequence is not a moral police. It is a river that remembers gravity. The hand that touches flame is taught heat. The mouth that forms harsh words tastes bitterness before the words arrive at another ear. The face that softens the faces around it. None of this is punishment or reward. It is the world replying in its natural voice. He swept the steps in the morning. The broom made its whispered agreements with stone. A novice ran past and carelessly kicked dust back onto what had been cleaned. The old sweeper felt a spark rise, old habit, and watched it light nothing because there was nothing dry to catch. He smiled and swept again, not resentful, not saintly, just participating in the conversation between dust and order. Cause, effect, effect, cause, a rhythm older than temples. In the kitchen, a pot boiled over. He lifted it with a cloth, late by a breath, and the water hissed at his fingers. He learned again, cloth first, then pot. Later, when a friend spoke sharply, he felt the same heat at the edge of the heart and used a cloth made of pores, lifted the situation with care, and found there was less to clean up. Let breath teach this without lecture. Inhale, causes gather, the open nose, the room's temperature, the steady mercy of lungs. Exhale, effects appear, shoulders down, belly soft, mind with fewer corners. When you withhold an exhale, the body replies with unease. When you give it, the body replies with ease. Not reward, reply. Notice how one kind touch often accumulates companions in the next hour. How one small cruelty tends to arrive home dragging cousins. At dusk, he walked the outer path. The foxes who had their own business crossed without ceremony, bright as questions. He bowed to them because bowing made his neck flexible and his heart honest. He did not fear becoming one again. He feared forgetting he was in a world where everything answers everything else. A falling leaf says autumn, and the ground says yes. A step says here, and the earth says welcome. A life says I am learning, and the world patient keeps teaching and teaching and teaching. The samurai wore anger like a second sword. It kept him warm. It kept people out of his way. In the town below the castle, a rumor found him. A swordsman of great skill lived disguised as a tea master. It is a kind of hunger to meet your equal, the hunger that wants either to bow or to cut. He sought the tea master and delivered his challenge in the middle of a street where crows like to argue about anything. The tea master, who had never lifted a sword, bowed as deeply as a man bows to gather a child he has dropped. "I will meet you at dawn by the river," he said, "because dawn is a good time for decisions." Then he walked home, knees not quite steady, heart practicing its drums badly. He visited a friend, an old warrior who had put away killing the way a snake sheds a skin and leaves it to frighten no one. "Teach me to die well," the tea master asked, because he did not wish to learn to kill badly in a single night. The old warrior poured tea before he spoke. He watched the tea master's hands, how they knew where the kettle should stand, how they placed the cups with the mindfulness of rain, how the whisk drew a green storm and then stilled it to a calm sea. "There," he said at last, "is your sword. Do that in the morning. If he sees the way you boil water, he will see the way you would cut if you cut. If he still wants your head, give it without complaint. But first, give him the ceremony." The tea master slept a little. He dreamed of his father's garden and the particular kindness with which dew assembles itself. He woke before the sky had decided on colour, washed his face in water cold enough to give him back his name, and walked to the river. The samurai was there, anger bright and sharp with its own polish. "Before we begin," the tea master said, "allow me to prepare tea." The samurai smirked, not unwilling to be entertained by delicacy before violence. The tea master opened his kit. Whisk, bowl, kettle. He folded his sleeves with the same attention you would give to the last sentence you ever planned to speak. He bowed to the water and to the fire and to the powder that had been leaves, and before that had been light. He lifted the kettle. Steam told its small story. His hands did not tremble, not because he had conquered fear, but because they were busy doing what they knew. The samurai watched. He saw, for the first time in weeks, a gesture with no waste. He saw the way the tea master met each object as if it might be his teacher. He saw himself reflected in the bowl as he had not seen himself reflected in any surface, without armor. The tea master finished and turned the bowl. He offered it like a life. The samurai took it, drank, and in that drinking remembered his mother, who had poured him sweet barley tea in summer and never asked if he would grow up to be dangerous. The river ran on. The tea master set the bowl down and put away the whisk. He looked up, eyes clear as a pond you could walk into, until it became you. He knelt and bared his neck as one bears a truth, clean, without ornaments. The samurai raised his sword. He could have cut a hair split, two in the air. He lowered the sword instead. Something in him recognized a power that did not draw blood to exist. He bowed to it. "Forgive me," he said, and in the saying forgave himself a small, heavy debt he'd carried like a second shadow. They parted. The tea master went home and made tea exactly the same way. The samurai went to the old warrior and asked to learn how to put his sword away without becoming less. The old warrior cleaned a second cup and said, "Whisk. Lessons arrive in the shape of what you can hold. Let your own composure do the work tonight. Inhale and feel the ritual of it. the small, dignified bow to air. Exhale and complete the gesture. Place the bowl on the rack of ribs and let the shoulders drop like sleeves. Hands unclasp. The tongue rests. If fear arrives with its many swords, give it a task. Ask it to hold the kettle while you light the fire. It will be too busy not spilling to invent a duel. The water warms. The steam speaks. The world, always ready to drink, leans closer. The path narrowed until the mountain felt like a breath held too long. On one side, the cliff rose like the quiet wall of a sleeping giant. On the other, it fell away into a green that kept its distances. Air moved along the rock face in thin, clean threads. Lichen patterned the stone with the patience of centuries. He walked carefully, boot soles memorizing each ledge before trusting it, the way fingers learn a friend's face in the dark. Far above, a hawk wrote circles into a cloud and left the cloud unscarred. The sound came first, the dry rustle of grass disturbed by something that knew where it was going. Then a shadow loosened from the shade and became stripes. A tiger, broad as a door laid on its side, stepped onto the path with the unhurried authority of a story that has been told for 1,000 years. Its eyes were not cruel, they were old. Its whiskers tasted the air. Its paws made no sound at all. He felt the old drum in his chest start up, the one that had learned to count without numbers. His hands did not ask for permission. They found a vine that trailed down the cliff, thick as a wrist and rough with the confidence of plants that have wanted only one thing for a very long time. He stepped into air and held on. Feet found rock, where rock offered a thought of foothold. The tiger watched from the path, amused by the way gravity keeps everyone honest, then settled on its belly, tail playing its own small game, eyes a pair of coins that had never been spent. Below, another tiger looked up from the green and considered breakfast. Its ears flicked once, annoyed that the sky was not a bowl it could reach into. The vine held. Wind came and looked him over the way a tailor measures a shoulder. In this hanging world, distance stacked itself. A few arm lengths above, a striped patience, a long fall below, a striped hunger. In his hands, a braided mercy. He heard a soft music near his ear. A white mouse and a black mouse, day and night dressed for work, taking turns nibbling the vine with the deep concentration of small employees performing their eternal task. The rasp was not loud, it was precise. He watched them and felt a smile rise, because even danger has its humor when you are very close to it and have run out of bargains. The vine creaked once like an old door remembering every visitor. In the notch of the cliff, his eye caught brightness. A strawberry had chosen to grow where no plan suggested it should. Green leaves cupped around a fruit so red it looked as if it had been praised into existence. Seeds freckled its surface with tiny suns. The small plant had threaded its roots into a palm of dirt the rock kept as a secret. He looked at it and felt the exact shape of wanting, not the hungry clutch of fear, but the simple yes of a tongue remembering summer. He reached. Fingers brushed cool leaf, then warm fruit. The scent lifted, a thin, sweet ribbon, and untied something behind his ribs. He pulled the strawberry free and held it for a moment, as if introducing it to the air, and the tigers and the mice and the day. It weighed almost nothing, which is how you know the important things. He brought it to his mouth and bit. Flesh yielded with the softest sound, like a sigh that had finally found its reason. Juice spread across tongue, bright and unapologetic. The taste carried fields with it. Bees arguing gently with clover. Soil warmed under the hand. Rain being remembered. Sunlight stored and given back without a ledger. He closed his eyes, not to leave the world, but to be more inside it. He chewed slowly because slowness was the only way to keep company with such a small miracle. The upper tiger's tail flicked, the lower tiger yawned. The mice, faithful to their vocation, kept time. He chewed again. The strawberry became sweetness, and then became breath, and then became the warmth that spreads when something has been exactly right. He took the second half in one patient mouthful and felt the tongue do its quiet alchemy. Fruit into intention, intention into ease. The vine still held. The mountain still held the vine. The sky held everything. Let your own jaw loose its hinge now. Let the mouth remember it was built for tasting more than talking. Inhale through the nose and feel coolness lift to the back of the throat, a little river finding home. Exhale and notice how the belly softens as if it had been promised kindness and then received it. Shoulders drop a slow width. The hands, whether they hold a vine or a sheet or nothing at all, find they are held in return by something larger that has never needed to be named. He looked up at the mice and laughed, not at them, but with the gravity of their dedication. "Good work," he said softly, and they did not pause to accept the compliment. He looked down at the lower tiger, whose whiskers were silvered by a light the canopy laminated and sent upward. "Good morning," he said, and meant it, because it was morning everywhere. He looked up at the upper tiger, who blinked slowly in the way cats blink when they approve of the weather. "Good morning," he said again, because there is more than enough greeting to go around. He noticed other strawberries, small, unripe, green as new thoughts, hiding under leaves. Future sweetness, practicing being leaf. He noticed the lichen's geometry, the way grey maps itself and never asks to be redrawn. He noticed the warm ache in his forearms, the quiet burn in the fingers, the body performing its mathematics so he could be here. He did not scold himself for slipping or congratulate himself for holding. He hung between teeth and teeth, between rasp and rope, and let the middle of his life become wide. If fear wants to speak, let it. Give it a task while it talks. Count the breaths. 1. Air enters like a friend who knows the house. 2. Air leaves like a guest who has been well fed. 3. A small sweetness that does not need reason spreads behind the tongue, remembered or imagined. It does not matter which. 4 muscles along the spine unlatch a fraction, and the body drops a secret bag it did not know it carried. The vine said nothing about how long it would be a vine. The cliff said nothing about how long it would be a cliff. The tigers said nothing about ethics. The day went on being morning because mornings are stubborn in their generosity. A tiny breeze came up from the green and touched his face the way a mother touches a child already asleep. He closed his eyes, and for a long, thin moment, there was only taste. No cliff, no creature, no story. Only the exact sweetness of exactly now. He did not invent an ending while he hung there. He did not practice last words, though some last words are beautiful and all last words are variations on "ah." He leaned his cheek against the vine's braided skin and listened. The vine sounded like nothing at all, which is the purest sound. A fly examined his sleeve and left him a blessing in unreadable script. Light moved a finger width along the stone. He breathed. He tasted the last bright film of strawberry on his teeth, and it tasted still like permission. If you wish, let the fruit appear on your own tongue now. It need not be strawberry. It could be the simple sweetness of air itself, the ordinary miracle of a swallow of water, the exact rightness of a pillow under the weight of a head that has thought enough. Put it in your mouth without story. Let it dissolve. Let the flavors go where flavors go. Let your life be the vine and the cliff and the tigers and the mice and the hand and the red fruit, all present, all temporary, all sufficient. The bell had fallen long before anyone now living could remember the day of falling. It lay on its side in the monastery pond, where lotus held the summer-like open hands. Bronze wore a robe of moss and water whispers. Dragonflies landed along its rim as if pausing at a friend's window. In drought, a shoulder of metal showed, greened and dignified. In rain, it disappeared entirely and became a rumour told by carp. The pond was old, even when Basho passed this way, sandals picking up the country one grain at a time. The path to it curved through cedar shade, then opened to a light that had learned patience. The surface of the water was a book that preferred to be unread. Reeds penned its margins with vertical script. Somewhere under the lilies, a turtle chose a direction very slowly and arrived exactly where it had meant to. He came at dusk on a day that had worked honestly, sweeping, mending, some quiet words traded like seeds. He sat on the low stone and folded himself into listening. Frogs rehearsed small lines. Wind turned a page it had turned before and would turn again. The bell, which had once carried mornings across fields, now carried the pond. Its mouth was full of water that made no claim to song. He waited, the way you wait without waiting, the spine close to straight but not military. The hands relaxed like nets in a boat that has already come ashore. The breath was its own metronome, no reason to improve it. He watched a mote of cotton ride the air and then decide to rest on a lily pad and become part of a green story that had no beginning in mind and no end to enforce. Then the frog, the one the pond had been thinking about all afternoon, jumped. It did not build drama or seek applause. It simply left the certainty of stone for the certainty of water. The sound was, what else could it be? Water, answered by its own nature. A soft slap that carried further than loud things. A syllable so brief it washed itself as it was spoken. Circles hurried from the point of entry and then remembered there was nowhere to hurry to. They widened, thinned, forgot to be circles. The bell did not ring, and yet the pond chimed. Old pond. A frog jumps in. Sound of water. If you listen with the part of the body that hears before hearing, the poem appears everywhere. The bell in your chest, set down years ago, fills and empties, making no complaint about rust. The frog of a thought hops. A ring spreads. Another thought is disturbed and then returns to its reed. The world goes on being water, which is to say it goes on becoming itself. He watched the rings reach the far bank, where grasses nodded because it is polite to nod when a guest speaks. He watched them touch the moss-covered lip of bronze and felt, very faintly, the bell answer in the only voice it kept, a slow, almost imagined hum that was more memory than sound. Perhaps that was invention. Perhaps the bell truly remembered the 1,000 mornings when a rope swung and it gave itself to air. In either case, the moment needed no witness, and yet invited one. He bowed, which is what the body does when it thanks without words. Let your own listening relax until it includes what seems too small to matter. Inhale and hear the quiet where sound will be. Exhale and hear the quiet where sound has been. The mouth softens. The tongue rests in its shallow cradle. The eyes close as if to let the ears have their turn. If a frog thought jumps, a plan. Oh, a regret. Hear it enter the water. Notice the circles without adding new stones. Allow the pond to do pond work. Reflect, receive, release. A novice arrived, breath a little quick from having tried not to hurry. He bowed and sat. They said nothing, which is the most reliable way to share a pond. The novice's mind ran a few laps around its favorite track, stopped to catch its breath, heard the last echoed edges of the frog's punctuation, and found itself smiling for no reason that could be protected by debate. They stayed as night customized the surface with stars. A bat wrote invisible cursive over the bell's old mouth. Somewhere near the cattails, another frog made the sentence again, because sentences that true have no fear of repetition. The sound stitched them into the dark in a way that required no thread. He thought of the men who had cast the bell, fire, mould, the liquid brightness poured, the patience of cooling, the first strike that made a sound thick enough to share with fields. He thought of the day it fell, storm perhaps, carelessness, a thin place in the wood, how the pond accepted it, the way the pond accepts leaves, moonlight, the occasional hat. The bell's work had not ended. It had moved offices, from sky to water, from declaring to listening. You can feel that exchange inside. The part of you that used to ring at every touch, that used to announce, can lie on its side in a quiet pond and feel rings pass through without needing to answer every one. The breath is the soft mallet now, striking nothing, inviting everything. Inhale, stillness widens. Exhale, stillness widens. The rings go out and return in the way all rings do, which is to say they simply become part of a larger stillness that was never small. A wind came down the slope carrying cedar and far cook fires. It brushed the pond. The pond pretended to be ruffled and then remembered its manners. The novice, perhaps thinking of the poem without making it a shrine, whispered "old pond" as if naming a friend he hoped would stay. Another frog leapt. The sound was the sound again, equally new, equally old. Time agreed to be water for a while. Eventually they stood. The stone remembered their weight and offered itself back without complaint. They bowed to the bell, which bowed to nothing because metal does not bend without effort, and effort is not its way anymore. They bowed to the frogs, who were gone before bows could interfere with frog business. They bowed to the pond, which is the same as bowing to the sky when the pond is in the mood to tell the truth. As they left, the path fed their feet to the dark with complete hospitality. The bell rested. The pond rested. The rings which had never left continued to be the world's way of saying yes to whatever enters and yes to whatever departs. If your mind returns there later, tap. Let the water do what it has always done. Let the sound be the sound of water. Let the bell be the bell that listens. Let the old pond be old and therefore new, and let the frog jump when it jumps. The garden had been composed 100 times and would be composed 100 more. Stones knew the story by heart. Moss remembered the footfall of clouds. Each morning the caretaker walked the path before anyone else, broom whispering along gravel as though erasing the night's last dreams. Cranes of fog lifted from the pond. A cypress combed the air with tidy fingers. Near the turn where the path met a low bridge, a little stone lantern stood, Chico d'Oro, its square cap etched by seasons, its window dark, its base softened with a collar of green. It had been placed carefully years ago, and so it stood carefully, faithful to that decision. One morning, the caretaker paused. The lantern was right, and also not. He could feel it the way you feel a robe seam slightly off the shoulder. Not painful, just asking to be set true. He squinted past the lantern toward the pond, then back to the curve of path, then up to the pale disk of sun rising like a coin you can't spend. He pressed the broom handle lightly against the lantern's cap and nudged. The heavy stone shifted an inch. The garden sighed. And the path looked as though it had been thinking this all along. He stepped back, tilted his head the other way, and smiled the obedient smile of a man who knows he is not in charge of very much. "Now it's perfect," he said. Not because perfection had arrived like a ceremony, but because the room inside his chest widened the way a door widens when you oil the hinge. He walked on. The lantern stood as it had always stood, only now it understood more intimately its neighbours. The angle of bridge, the soft bend of a reed, the way morning light glanced off water and, through the lantern's square, framed a moving picture. Gardeners came later and did not notice. Visitors admired stones that had not moved at all. A child ran a hand along the lantern's base and felt the cool speech of grit and lichen. At sunset, the caretaker returned with a small candle. He placed it inside the lantern's belly and struck a spark. Flame took politely and learned the window's shape. The inch of difference made a new map for light to travel. The cap's shadow shifted just enough for a moth to enter and be puzzled more sweetly than before. Perfection was never the point. Attention was. He had once spent a year chasing the dragon called Just Right, moving rake lines a finger's width, and then back again, adjusting a rock so slightly you'd need a story to justify the muscle. In that year, he discovered a shy truth. The heart rests, not when the world is flawless, but when it is tended. Tending is a conversation, not a victory. The inch he gave the lantern wasn't a conquest of taste. It was a bow to the subtle gravity of all the other inches in the garden. He put the broom aside and sat on a flat stone whose top had learned the grammar of sitting bones. A breeze leaned into the bamboo and made a sound like sleeves brushing in a corridor. A dragonfly made a cross, then an X, then a line, as if signing a treaty with air. The caretaker let his eyes soften until edges grew friendly. He didn't plan a single improvement. In the softness, a leaf's torn margin looked deliberate. A stone's chip became a story of winter. The lantern's little window held the pond and sky as if they felt safe there. You can let something inside you shift by an inch now. It does not need to be dramatic. Let the tongue fall from the roof of the mouth. That is 1 inch. Let the shoulders drop the weight of a coin. Another inch. Allow the breath to arrive without being hired. An inch more. The face releases a plan it was holding. Just one. And the garden of your body looks truer than it did a moment ago. Not perfect. More itself. Visitors asked about technique, wanting a rule they could carry away. He told them about seasons. In spring, the lantern wore a shawl of pollen, and its square window held the green ache of newness. In summer, the insects came and argued about nothing within its frame. In autumn, fallen needles collected along its roof in a little golden thatch, a monk's wig. In winter, snow gave it shoulders and quieted it further. He brushed it, not to erase time, but to see time better. The inch he moved it today would be wrong somewhere else, at some other hour. Here now, it was correct. The way a held breath can be correct for a single, delicious moment. When the rain came, the lantern turned dark and deep, and water beaded along the sill like a string of tiny lanterns, each with its own brief flame. He learned to love the chipped corner that caught the first bead and released it last. He learned to love the thin crack traveling from base to window, not as a flaw, but as a biography. Freeze, thaw, an old accidental bump from a gardener with more strength and gentleness. "Is that so?" he had said then, smiling, and now the crack meant the lantern had a voice. Let your attention be the hand that nudges, not the judge who scolds. Breathe in and feel the place that has been aiming too tightly, perhaps between the eyes, perhaps where the ribs meet. Exhale and shift it a hair. Notice how the world reorganizes around that kindness. Suddenly, the pillow supports instead of argues. The blanket drapes with less ambition. You are the lantern, and the one who moves it, and the visitor who knows only that something, barely named, is now right. That night, the lantern burned until the candle burned out, and the absence of flame was as lovely as the flame had been. In the window, a square of night deepened. A spider anchored a line from the cap to a reed and wrote a sentence for moonlight to read. The inch of difference did not announce itself. It served its hour and then joined the quiet army of decisions that hold a place together without asking for applause. The caretaker slept, and in his dream, he moved the lantern back exactly where it had been. He woke, laughed, and let the dream be correct in the country where it belonged. In the village by the bend, gossip traveled like a sparrow, quick, directionless, sure that every rooftop wanted its feet. It landed first at the baker's ear while he was counting loaves, then flew to the fishmonger's apron and left a white feather there. The monk, the one who paints peaches that look more like peaches than peaches do. He has fathered a child, they said, and for a moment the street was bright with the satisfaction of knowing a thing. They brought the baby in a bundle of blue cloth, the mother's father stern and swollen with his task. The monk was stacking wood. His sleeves were rolled and his forearms carried honest dust. The old man set the bundle down like a verdict. "This is yours," he said. "Is that so?" the monk replied, like a person greeting weather. He lifted the baby. The bundle turned into a face, creased, unconsulted, perfect. The monk's hands remembered how to be boats. Villagers gathered with mouths prepared for righteousness. They expected denial or argument, so they could season their gossip with outrage. The monk tucked the baby into the space between his heart and his ribs, the warm pocket the body keeps for what is helpless. "Is that so?" he said again, softer to the child, to the old man, to the afternoon. He bowed. The old man, deprived of the sport of resistance, stumbled over his own anger and left without an enemy. Nights changed shape. The monk learned the 3 a.m. road between Cry and Milk, the 4 a.m. valley where breath becomes a small boat the tired ride to morning. He painted less and watched more. He learned to boil barley with one hand, while the other drew small circles on a soft back. He learned the language of tiny hiccups. He laughed sometimes alone, because a hiccup is the universe practicing surprise. He cut his robe shorter and made the hem into diapers. He did not instruct anyone about compassion. He scrubbed cloth on a washboard with the peaceful seriousness he once brought to sutras. On market days, he carried the child in a sling, and the same tongues that had named him guilty named him father with a tone that wanted to be punishment, and often turned to praise against their will. When the baby slept, the monk's breath slowed until it matched the child's, and for a few heartbeats, the village square felt like a temple that had decided to try being a square. He did not defend his name. He fed what was hungry. The child got heavier and then lighter as sleep arrived. He set the little one in a woven basket by the window and painted, not peaches now, but light. Light learning a cheek. Light making a fist look like a wrapped pearl. He stopped signing his work. He stopped thinking of any of it as work. Months passed. The mother, who had named the monk because naming moves weight quickly, grew softer where blame had made her stiff. Shame loosens in the presence of a baby. It is hard to hold a grudge and a foot at the same time. Her father's face learned new muscles, those that lift and those that release. The house learned to make room for truth. They came back to the monk in late summer when crickets had taken over most of the speech in town. The old man's hat looked too big for his apology. The mother bowed until the bow became a small earthquake of tears. "It was not you," she said. "Is that so?" the monk said, and the words slid into the room like a river rejoining itself. He brought the baby to her without a legal argument. "Is that so?" he whispered into the child's hair. And the hair smelled like sun and sleep and milk, which is to say, it smelled like forgiveness. The villagers watched, starved for spectacle and full of relief. Someone had prepared a speech about justice. It spoiled in the sun. Someone else had sharpened a joke. It dulled in a pocket and was later used to open a fish. The monk's reputation returned to him like a dog that had been bitten by geese, sheepish, changed, still loyal. He petted it once and sent it to sleep on the porch. At night, he lay on his mat, both arms suddenly his again. The room felt wide and strangely lonely in places where a cradle's wheeze had filled the dark with purpose. He put his hands on his belly and noticed a slight ache where the sling had ridden. He smiled and let the ache speak. It said nothing tragic, only, "You carried, and now you are empty." He answered, "Is that so?" And in the answer, there were two things: a bow to what had been and a chair set out for what would be. Let your own listening take this shape. If a story arrives claiming to be you, praise or blame, let it perch and fly. Inhale the way the monk inhaled when a cry began. Exhale the way he exhaled when a cry ended. Mouth soft, throat without a gatekeeper. If regret comes looking important, give it a warm cloth to fold. If pride knocks loudly, hand it a spoon and point at the soup. Is that so? You can say to both, meaning, you may pass through. I do not need to build a house in your shape. The baby, back with the mother, learned to roll, then to sit, then to stand with the unsure toes of a drunk saint. Sometimes she visited the monk. She toddled to the window and slapped the light with both hands, praising it correctly. The monk lifted her and let her pull his nose as if it were a bell rope. It rang inside him, and the day organized around the note. Years later, someone asked him, "How did you bear it? Being accused, being praised, being wronged, being righted?" He set down his brush. A fly circled the rim of his cup and could not find a sermon there. He answered in the same voice he used for weather and for soup. "Is that so?" He did not mean indifference. He meant the wide field where facts can graze without being made into enemies. Autumn slipped its hand into the sleeves of the trees and guided them toward the door. The first yellow appeared at the edges of a maple, like a thought remembering its gentleness. Mornings came blue and honest, the kind that makes the world look freshly washed and hung to dry. In the courtyard, the ginkgo began its 1,000 tiny suns routine, and the gardener's broom readied its poem of gentle goodbyes. She sat by the window and watched a single leaf argue with the twig. It was not a loud argument. The leaf had been comfortable all season, drinking light, manufacturing shade, holding raindrops like jewelry. The twig, for its part, had been glad to keep company. Now a thread, invisible and inevitable, thinned between them. When wind passed, the leaf turned its flat palm to the sky and listened. "Not yet," it said silently. "Soon," said the tree. A breeze rehearsed along the eaves. The leaf pivoted, showing its second face, the side that had looked at summer and kept its opinions to itself. Veins made a map of rivers that never forgot their sources. The stem darkened at the place where decision gathers. She found her breath matching the leaf's small movements. Inhale, the leaf lifts. Exhale, the leaf returns. She smiled because the little choreography was so honest, and because secretly she had her own thread thinning, one she had been watching for days. In the lane beyond the gate, children dashed through drifts of gold, kicking eternity into the air and cheering when it fell. The old woman across the way counted persimmons and declared them sweet enough to soften with a little waiting. A cat wore a scarf of sunlight and made a point of ignoring the season. The leaf loosened another fraction. Let your body learn this pace. Inhale as if the tree draws you up into colour. Exhale as if the twig has shared a humble wisdom and you have agreed. The brow smooths, the jaw slackens, the chest opens its windows, then pulls them nearly closed to keep out the chill, then opens them again because the air knows what it's doing. Hands rest in their lap, no projects hidden inside them. Clouds arrived from the west with bellies that knew rain by name. The first drop struck the sill exactly where the paint had peeled into the shape of a tiny island nation. The leaf felt the weight of a dozen brief visitors and bowed. A heavier gust leaned across the courtyard with a sound like long silk. The leaf turned once, twice, resettled. The thread thinned to the width of a sentence you can't quite finish. She remembered a friend who had moved away in spring, the room they had left, the square of lighter paint when a picture disappears. She remembered a promise she had made to herself and kept almost completely, and decided almost completely is a kind of perfection. The leaf wavered. She exhaled longer and felt the body unclasp a little satchel of worry she'd kept at the hip. It thumped very softly on the floor and did not break. At last, the wind did not persuade. It reminded. The leaf let go, not like a soldier dropping a flag, but like a sleepwalker trusting the stair. It became a small boat in a slow sky river. Its spinning showed her both sides again and again, until the distinction lost interest and wandered away. Halfway down, the leaf remembered dancing and did it badly and beautifully. And then, at the perfect place the ground had saved, it landed with the faintest drum. That faint drum was everything being everything. The world did not change colour to mark the event. A second leaf began its own negotiation. Somewhere in the field, the last cricket tried out its instrument and put it away without disappointment. She touched the sill where the drop had struck and felt the coolness move into her finger, like advice that doesn't need words. She breathed, and the breath had a flavour, clean, a little sweet, the taste of endings that are not arguments. If something inside you is ready to fall, you do not need to shake the branch. You might simply notice the stem has gone from green to the colour of good tea. You might let wind speak to it, the wind that is your age, your season, your honest fatigue, your relief. Inhale and gather, exhale and give. Inhale, hold the story one more beat. Exhale, set the story down on soft earth. Perhaps it will become soil for a seed you don't need to plant. Evening gathered its shawl around the hills. The ginkgo dropped more suns all at once, the way some trees like to do, decisive, generous. The gardener came with the broom, and each stroke sounded like gratitude. She went outside, stooped, and lifted the leaf that had given her the day's lesson. The veins were delicate as breath frozen on glass. She pressed it between 2 pages of a book that knew about letting go and placed the book aside. She would find it months later. Flat, gold, a map to a place she had already reached. Night loosened. In the courtyard, last light held its breath on the edge of everything and then exhaled. She lay down, pulling the blanket up as one would draw a curtain for a play that has finished bowing. In the body, leaves released, the mind's high branch, the muscle at the base of the skull, the knot in the throat that had been practicing speeches. Each let go in its own time. She did not count them. She listened to the quiet thumps, soft as footfalls in snow. A breeze moved across the roof and explained something gently to the tiles. The tree outside was a darker dark against dark. From time to time, a leaf completed its little life with a sigh that could almost be heard. If her mind reached for tomorrow's weather, it noticed the stem and returned to the branch. If a memory came holding a small banner of regret, it was folded and laid with the others in a neat pile that would become spring. The body, obeying the oldest ritual, followed the leaf down, turning, drifting, finding the ground prepared and arriving without ceremony where everything begins again.